Miss Morrison, can I have your attention, please? Mackenzie looked up at the judge. Thank you for your honest answer. That seems to be the first time you've told the truth today. Now I will invite Mr. Other or his lawyer to respond to the claim of emotional harm. Kim spoke up. We appreciate Ms. Morrison's honest statement just now, but at this time, we have nothing else to add except that we still deny that claim of emotional harm. Understood. Thank you, Counselor. I believe we can dismiss this claim. Can everyone agree? The judge looked around and received nods from both sides. Now, let's move on to the issue of financial difficulties, he said. I'm having trouble understanding this one, Ms. Morrison. In your parents' divorce settlement, the money set aside for your university was allowed to stay with Mr. Other because you chose to be adopted by Mr. Morrison. This was because your biological father was the only one who contributed to that account. Since you and your mother chose to leave him and had him adopted, I felt that the funds were forfeited. In your mother's letter to your biological father, she mentioned that he could not provide the finer things in life as a plumber. He held up the letter. Carol turned red at the sight of it after all this time. Now that you are no longer under his care, I don't understand how you can blame your financial troubles on him. Would you like to explain? Mr. Forsyth, you may speak for your client, as it seems she is still upset from earlier, the judge said. Yes, Your Honor, he said while looking at some papers in front of him. The Morrisons believe their current financial issues are linked to their interactions with Mr. Other after the divorce. The judge nodded. I follow you so far, Counselor, but your reasoning might be flawed. Please go on and explain why the Morrisons' financial troubles are Mr. Other's responsibility. Well, Your Honor, if Mr. Other had not kept meeting with Mr. Morrison, then Mr. Morrison would not have had to face probation. He wouldn't have threatened Mr. Other or lost his job, which put them in a position where they have to rely only on Mr. Morrison's trust fund to get by. The judge leaned back in his chair and picked up a pen, observing Mackenzie's lawyer. Mr. Forsyth? I'm not sure if you realize how unreasonable that sounds when compared to the evidence I have in front of me. You claim Mr. Other is responsible for the Morrisons' financial situation and needs to pay them. Because from what I can tell, the Morrisons are the ones who caused harm. Mr. Other even faced serious problems twice just because he was in the Morrisons' area each time. The judge seemed to enjoy seeing the lawyer squirm. Yes, Your Honor. We believe that if Mr. Other hadn't been in those places, Mr. Morrison wouldn't have acted this way, and the Morrisons wouldn't be in trouble now. So, we think Mr. Other should give them some money for that. I understand. That seemed to be the judge's favorite phrase. He looked at Kim and me. Would you like to say something? Of course, Your Honor, Kim replied. While my client recognizes that he had interactions with Mr. Stephen Morrison, Mrs. Carol Morrison, and Ms. Mackenzie Morrison, he does not accept any financial responsibility for what happened. Kim took a moment to collect her thoughts. We live in a free society where we can choose who to interact with. In every situation where my client met the Morrisons, they approached him. He never started the contact. In every case, except for that one in the hospital when he was given unknown substances, my client tried to leave the situation. He was the one who suffered. Furthermore, we believe that the Morrisons could have chosen to walk away and not engage with my client. If they had done that, they wouldn't be facing financial troubles now. Their current situation is a result of their choices. The judge listened to Kim. That's an interesting viewpoint, Counselor. And I understand your perspective. I glanced at Mackenzie again. She seemed to have missed this conversation and was still crying in her chair. Carol was looking back and forth between Mackenzie and me. Well, given the circumstances, I will rule that the money stays with Mr. Arthur. I think that. I raised my hand. May I speak, Your Honor? The judge turned his gaze to me. Of course, Mr. Arthur. What would you like to say? I took a deep breath, similar to how the lawyers had before. This was going to be tough. Your Honor, I must say that I have no fondness for my ex-wife. She left me so easily for someone else that I cannot forgive or forget her actions. I have also been hurt by my daughter's behavior. The way she has treated me over the past few years has been painful. A lot of the love I once felt for her has faded. I understand, Mr. Arthur. I encounter such feelings often in my role. What are you trying to convey? I'd like to make one final gesture to my daughter, I said. Mackenzie looked up at me suddenly, hope shining in her eyes. Your Honor, I have worked hard to create a new life for myself over the past couple of years. To get to this point, I have faced many challenges, both physical and emotional, mostly because of the women on the other side of this court and the man you removed earlier. I smiled and shared this. Through it all, I have found love again. We just got married this past weekend and plan to enjoy our honeymoon after this is finished. I realize that I may never want to see my ex-wife or former daughter again. I want to move forward in love with my new family and build a happy life. The judge raised an eyebrow. I reached out to Kim and she pulled out the document I had asked for. Her expression seemed to ask, "Do you really want to go through with this?" I wasn't sure, but I wanted closure. I wanted it done. This document was prepared by my legal counsel. It states that I will transfer $142,000 from the bank account I initially set up for Mackenzie's college funds into a special trust. Carol stared at me with her mouth open. I couldn't tell what Mackenzie was thinking. She was still crying. The money in this trust can only be used for Mackenzie's living expenses and education costs when she starts college. Since she is 17, Mackenzie will be able to start college next year, so if she is accepted, most of her tuition and costs can be covered by this money. However, if she does not go to college, the trust will be inaccessible until she turns 30, at which point she can take out up to $5,000 each month. The only other condition is that neither Carol nor Mackenzie Morrison will have any contact with me again. I heard Mackenzie take a deep breath from the other side of the room. The judge just looked at me. I continued. Every time my ex-wife speaks to me, she asks for this money. Since the divorce, I have not touched the account. I am tired of arguing over it, so I want to give it to Mackenzie under the conditions I've set. I can't handle the pain that comes with every interaction with my daughter. I spoke clearly, though I felt tears running down my face. It hurts not knowing if I will see the loving girl I raised, or the young woman who has hurt me with her words. Even now, after all this pain, a part of me wants to run over and hug her, to let her know how much I love her. I heard Mackenzie sob. If I looked around the room, I saw that most people, even Carol, had tears in their eyes. Your Honor, I cannot move on with my new life if I keep looking back. These women have caused me pain, but I know I can heal if I let go. My new life with my new family is calling to me. If I can do this one last thing for the young woman over there, the girl I used to call my daughter, and make sure that Stephen Morrison does not get to that money, I think I can finally feel at peace. My life would be so different if he had not gotten close to my ex-wife. I might still be divorced, but I could still have a relationship with Mackenzie. This is my offer to Mackenzie. Thank you, I said to close. I turned away, took a tissue from Kim, and wiped my eyes. The judge cleared his throat. Would you like to say anything more, counselor? Kim also cleared her throat. Yes, Your Honor. We have set 30 days from today for Ms. Mackenzie Morrison to accept this agreement. If she does not accept it by then, the offer will be canceled and my client will keep the funds. I think that is fair, Counselor, the judge replied with a nod. Now, regarding the issue of mental cruelty, this matter is settled in favor of Mr. Terry Other, with no financial effects on either side. Each party will pay for its own legal expenses. About the financial hardship, I again conclude in favor of Mr. Terry Other, again with no financial effects on either side, and again, each shall cover its own legal costs. The financial offer to Ms. Mackenzie Morrison is noted but is outside this court's authority. In my closing statement, I would like to address Mrs. Carol Morrison. Mrs. Morrison, may I have your attention? Carol straightened up. Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Morrison, it is not usual for me to speak to someone in the audience, but I feel I need to give you a warning. Many of the records show you in an unflattering way. A lot of what has happened is, in some way, because of your actions. You think you are in a very difficult financial situation, but I do not believe that is the case. Carol swallowed hard. I cannot tell you how to live your life. However, I suggest that you think carefully about your situation and that of your daughter. I also advise you to stay away from your ex-husband moving forward, regardless of what your daughter decides about the university trust. Let him move on. It seems he is content. You also need to find some happiness for yourself. Yes. Yes, Your Honor, Carol responded. That is just advice, Mrs. Morrison, the judge warned, looking around the room. Well, this has been interesting, but I do not want to see any of you back here again. This court is now adjourned. And with that, it was over. Kim took the agreement to Mackenzie's lawyer, and we left the court. At the cafe, we saw Paul and the girls anxiously waiting for news. I felt a bit sad after the court hearing, so Kim shared most of the details, including my heartfelt speech at the end. My wives were proud of me and held me close, whispering words of love in my ear every few minutes. We talked for about an hour, and during that time, Kim noticed Carol and Mackenzie leaving the courthouse. The other person wasn't with them. They looked tired and worn out from a distance. I could relate to how they felt. Our honeymoon was wonderful. During those 10 days, I got to learn more about my wives, and we enjoyed our time together. We wore very little clothing most of the time, and my wives looked great in their swimsuits. When we went out, I felt proud, walking alongside two beautiful women. By the time we got back home, I had almost forgotten about my past life. It was a small detail, but Mackenzie signed the agreement, and Kim took care of everything, moving the money into the trust. She asked if I wanted to know what Mackenzie would study at university, but I said no. I felt that part of my life was finished. 2 months later, we discovered that both of my wives were pregnant. They had stopped using birth control a month before the wedding and kept it a secret from me. They both started feeling sick in the mornings shortly after. Tests confirmed that I would be a father again, this time twice over. My parents were thrilled, and I got both teasing and high fives at the office. We were all surprised at the 12-week scan. Both my wives were expecting twins. I wasn't sure how we would manage 4 babies at once, but as I cuddled with my wives that night, I knew we would face it together. Kim and Paul couldn't believe the news, and Kim playfully teased me for weeks about having 2 pregnant wives, both expecting twins. She also shared that she and Paul were having another baby, so that would make 5 new little ones in our circle. The only sad news was that my mother was becoming quite fragile. Her cancer was getting worse, and we were all concerned. Harmony spoke with different specialists, And before it was too hard for her to travel, we visited 3 cancer doctors. They reviewed my mom's medical history and all agreed that we should focus on making her comfortable and continue her treatments at the local hospital. We finally convinced my parents to move to Bathurst for better support. This way, they could be nearby and help with the babies when they arrived. It also meant we could have our mom close for support. By the time the girls were 6 months along, we had moved our mom and dad into a small place about 15 minutes away. Dad was working part-time for a local builder, and Mom usually had someone with her during the day or night. We encouraged Kim and Paul to move too. They settled into a house near our parents' home. Kim was a few weeks ahead of the girls and a bit grumpy. Paul and I handled most of the moving while Kim scolded us for everything we did wrong. She was preparing for the baby. My niece Candace thought it was all a fun adventure. She had just started speaking in full sentences and found it funny when her mom asked her dad to move the same box to different rooms in just a few minutes. She also loved to touch her mom's and aunt's baby bumps, feeling the little kicks. Both Melody and Harmony were growing quickly, and since Kim was a bit ahead of them, she was also quite big. I should mention that the air conditioning in the house was quite cold. It reminded me of a scene from a movie where a character keeps changing clothes while moving in and out of the house. All 3 pregnant women wanted the cool air, so we made sure the temperature was comfortable all day long. As the time got closer, it was also one of the few times my wives didn't cuddle with me at night. It wasn't because they didn't want to, it was just too hard for them. I would cuddle each of them separately in bed each night, and we made do by holding hands until the babies arrived. When the time came, it all happened at once. I've mentioned the special bond twins have before, and my girls certainly felt it during labor too. At 38 weeks, they went into labor just 2 hours apart. Since they were having twins, we all agreed it was safer for them to have a cesarean birth. Both my girls were prepped in operating rooms next to each other as I nervously walked between them. The first to be born was my son, Adam. He had a big shock of brown hair and a strong cry that any father could be proud of. Next was my daughter, Grace, who was calm and had striking green eyes. Then came my third daughter, Beth, who was born next. Like Adam, she also had a strong cry. Finally, my second son, John, was born. We initially wanted to name him Colin, but he looked so much like my father that we chose to honor him by using the name John. 3 days later, Kim went into labor and welcomed Candace's little sister, Holly. We would all be raising a big family together, and even though it might get hectic, I knew I would not want to be anywhere else. I almost regretted those words during the first 6 months. With 4 new kids to care for, everyone was exhausted. There were constant diaper changes. The girls were always feeding the little ones. At times, it felt like we would lose our patience with each other, but around 6 months, all 4 of them began sleeping through the night. We eventually found a routine, and our closeness returned even stronger. The kids were nearly 2 years old when we lost Mom. She held on for as long as she could, and we supported her every day. In her final days, she spent a lot of time with her grandchildren, showering them with love and warmth. I hope the kids remember her fondly as they grow older. There's a wall full of pictures of her holding all 6 grandkids in our parents' hallway. Dad was sad but proud. Mom had fought valiantly and never gave up. We knew the end was near when she asked us 5 to come and see her one Saturday afternoon. That afternoon, we did what we always did as a family. We joked and reminisced about our childhood. We laughed about the busy life we were now living with 6 kids. I think Mom sensed it was time, because she started asking for a few moments alone with each of us. She hugged Melody and Harmony closely, even though she was very frail. I love you both so much, my dear daughters. You have brought great happiness to Terry. I never thought I would see him so joyful again after what Carol did. but you both came into his life like a storm and healed his heart and mind. I can never thank you enough." They exchanged more words of love, and my wives were in tears when they came out. Kim went in with Paul while I held my girls, our kids quietly watching a movie in the background. After a few minutes, Paul came out with tears in his eyes, asking me to go in. I sat on the bed. Kim was already crying, holding Mom close like a young girl. "Oh, my babies," Mom said softly. "I love you both with all my heart. I don't think a parent could be prouder than I am of you. I've seen you both grow, and I love how you have always stayed close, even as adults. You have been there for each other through tough times. But I have one last request for you both." "Yes, Mom. Anything," I said, while Kim held on tight, trying to keep her close. "I need you to take care of your dad. He's trying to be strong, but he needs you both to help him face what's ahead. He still has many years left, and I don't want him to feel lost. Your father is my greatest love, and I will always be with him. Even in death, our love will remain." We were all crying now. I remembered a time a few years ago when Mom had asked me something similar. Even now, as she grew weaker before our eyes, my mother kept thinking of her family. Despite the pain and the illness, she focused on her husband. "Promise me, you two. Look after your father," she said, gently. We held on to her tightly, tears streaming down. "We promise, Mom. We will," my sister Kim said through her sobs. We all stayed there a while longer, feeling only love and support for each other. Then, Mom asked to speak to me alone. Kim dried her eyes, squeezed my shoulder, and quietly left the room. Mom drew me close, resting against me as I held her gently. "Oh, my dear Terry, I have loved watching the man you've grown into, patient, and always trying to do what's right. Even when Carol and Mackenzie hurt you, you tried to handle it with honor." I shook my head slightly. "Not always, Mom. There were times I didn't manage so well." She placed her hand on mine. "I know, Terry. None of us is perfect, not even your mother." "Hard to believe," I replied with a small smile. "I thought you were saintly." She laughed softly, the sound a little raspy but warm. "No, not always. Your father and I hit a rough patch before you and Kim were born," she admitted, and I was surprised. "Your dad was working long hours because we'd just bought our first house. I was working at the bank, but he was hardly around, even on weekends. So when an assistant manager at work showed some interest in me, I was flattered." For a moment, I wondered what she was saying, and she must have noticed my expression. She smiled. "No, I didn't do anything wrong. But things could have gone differently if something hadn't happened at a gathering a few weeks later. You see, I saw Cindy Phillips, one of my co-workers, acting a little too friendly with your dad. She even gave me a look like she thought she could take him from me." "What did you do?" I asked. "I decided that I wasn't going to lose what was important to me. I went right up to your dad and made it clear that he was mine, and he understood," she said with a nostalgic smile. "After that, our bond grew even stronger, and soon enough, you and your sister came along. Looking back, that moment was a turning point for us." We both sat quietly, each of us thinking about how certain moments could shape a whole lifetime. Mom went on. "Terry, I know it's been hard for you to forgive Carol, and maybe you don't need to. But what about Mackenzie? Do you have enough left in you to forgive my granddaughter?" I looked at my mother, who was very weak, and took a deep breath. "I don't know, Mom. I haven't really thought about it for a while. She hurt me a lot, and I'm not sure how I would feel if I saw her again." She nodded slowly. "Terry, please think about it. I'm not asking you to go find her and bring her back into your life. You have so much on your plate right now with your 4 kids and Kim's too. I doubt reaching out to Mackenzie would be a good idea. She smiled softly. By the way, did you know Kim is having another baby? Yeah, she told me this morning. I smiled back. It makes me happy to know I have so many grandchildren. There was a time I thought I would only have Mackenzie. I know, Mom. I can't promise anything, but I'll try my best if I ever see her again. She touched my arm gently. That's all I can ask, sweetie. That's all I need. After that, Dad spent some time with Mom and came out with a mix of smiles and tears. It's not much longer, everyone. She knows it, and she asked us all to be with her. Paul, Kim, Melody, Harmony, Dad, and I gathered around Mom's bed. We shared stories and jokes for the next hour. The kids came in and out, showing love and care for their grandmother. They sensed something was wrong but didn't fully understand. There were moments of laughter and moments of tears as the afternoon went on. Gentle touches from Mom showed the love we all had for her. She slipped away from us while we were talking about Kim's new baby. We heard her laugh at the idea of it being a boy, and then we looked over to see her smiling, but the light had left her eyes. Her breathing had stopped, yet she looked peaceful, even though the essence of who she was no longer with us. The rare cancer that took over her body had affected her deeply, but it never broke her spirit. Josephine Marie Other was quiet and gentle at times, yet she always loved us unconditionally. That evening, we all cried together, leaning on each other in our sorrow. A little over a year later, Kim gave birth to Joseph, named after Mom. We were having a family barbecue on a lovely spring Saturday. Dad was with the rest of the family. He had been sad for a while after Mom passed, but one day he told us she wouldn't want him to stay gloomy for the rest of his life. Dad, Paul, and I were bringing in the food when I noticed two women standing there who hadn't been invited. Most of us were lost in our own thoughts when the metal plate dropped to the floor, pulling everyone's attention back to me. Hi, Terry, Carol, my ex-wife, said as she looked at me. She felt tired and worn out. Over the years, she had gained weight in places she didn't like. Her once attractive curves were now covered by excess weight. I, on the other hand, was still in good shape. In fact, I probably looked even better since we last met, especially if her hungry eyes were any clue. I bet she didn't know how we would react to her showing up uninvited. But deep down, she must have realized it wouldn't be a warm welcome. Our second visitor looked at me, and before I could say anything, Mackenzie, my ex-stepdaughter, chimed in. Hi, Daddy. She stood with her head slightly down, peeking at me from under a worn baseball cap I had given her years ago. Mackenzie looked nothing like the girl who had hurt me in the past. She seemed fragile, just like her mother. For what felt like a long time, we all just stared at each other. The only sound was from the kids at the table, but even they sensed something was wrong and noticed the two unexpected guests interrupting dinner. I sighed and bent down to pick up the tray of meat I had dropped, placing it back on the table. I signaled to Martha, who recognized them and was glaring at them. Martha, could you please serve the kids some food? I think this may take a few minutes, I asked. She stopped glaring at Carol and Mackenzie. Her expression softened as she looked at me. Martha knew my struggles almost better than anyone else. She had supported me through a lot over the years, and likely understood how I felt at that moment. She was one of the wisest people I knew, and crossing her family would not sit well with her or her community. Suddenly focused on the kids, her former family seemed to fade from her mind. No problem, Terry. You take care of what you need to. I'll handle the kids, she replied kindly. I turned back to my ex-family and let my expression show how I felt. For the sake of the children here, I won't say everything on my mind right now. But you both need to understand that you are not welcome here. I struggled to keep my voice steady, almost letting my frustration slip out. Carol looked upset, but it seemed she expected such a response. Mackenzie appeared ready to cry. At that moment, Kim stood beside me, with Melody and Harmony flanking the other side. Melody took my hand, silently reassuring me that she was there for support. She recognized the visitors, just like her sister Harmony, and understood how I might be feeling. Carol sighed deeply and looked around the room before settling her eyes on me again. Once I cherished those eyes and loved looking into them. Now, all I could see was a face filled with pain, regret, and sadness, which caught me off guard. "We know, Terry, but we need to talk with you." Oh no, I never thought my old family would show up in my life, here, in Bathurst. First, rules said that Mackenzie had to stay away from me if she wanted to access her trust fund for college. Second, these women had blamed me for all their problems, even though they made their own poor choices when I was around. As I mentioned, Carol didn't look well. Unlike my wives, Melody and Harmony, she seemed out of shape. Her face had deep lines, and her body didn't seem attractive anymore. At that moment, she looked more like a potato than a stylish mother in her late 40s. It seemed like she had given up on life. On the other hand, Mackenzie, my former daughter, had lost a lot of weight. She looked thin, her skin sagged a bit, and her movements seemed awkward and painful. She didn't have the lively spirit that should come from someone in their 20s. Despite everything that had happened, I doubted either of them would just show up at my door without a good reason. Considering how they appeared and our past conversations, I worried they might be after money. For the last few years, Carol's new husband and Mackenzie's stepfather, Stephen Morrison, whom we called unkind names, had been in prison for 30 years after pleading guilty to serious assault. I really disliked him, and I knew the feeling was mutual. Still, a part of me felt sorry for him, as my family and I believed he had lost control because my ex-wife had dreams about me while sleeping next to him. I looked around the room at everyone present. My lovely wives, Melody and Harmony. My father, John, my sister and her husband, Kim and Paul, my in-laws, William and Martha, and my former family, Carol and Mackenzie. They were all watching me, waiting to see what would happen next. I focused back on Carol and Mackenzie, thinking about them. Old feelings returned anger for their betrayal and how they left me for someone else because I didn't seem enough for them. Each encounter had been filled with disappointment as they flung insults my way. Every conversation felt insincere as they asked me for money. I wanted to tell them to leave, but something stopped me. This was my home, and I took a deep breath, counting to 10 while they waited for me to speak. I sighed and said, "Let's go sit in the back and get this over with." I looked at Martha with the kids and then Paul. "Martha and Paul, could you feed the kids while we talk outside?" "Sure, Terry," Paul replied, sitting next to his daughter, Candace, and my son, Adam. Between us, we had 7 kids. I had 2 sets of twins, one with my legal wife, Harmony, and one with my assumed wife, Melody. To make it more interesting, Melody and Harmony are identical twins. As far as we knew, 2 sets of twins from the same father had never happened before. A few medical journals had written about us, but we decided not to go public. I love my wives and kids, and I didn't want to subject them to the chaos of the media. We walked to the back and settled at the large family table on the deck. The lights lit up the garden, which I had just tidied up that day, and the smell of fresh-cut grass helped ease everyone's nerves. I sat on one side of the big table, with Melody on my right and Harmony on my left. Across from us sat Carol and Mackenzie, with Kim at one end of the table. A few moments later, my dad and William came out with a pitcher of water and cups for everyone. They brought a drink for Melody and me and wine for Harmony, then went back inside to help with the kids, knowing we needed privacy. Harmony poured drinks for everyone who didn't have one and waited for us to begin. After a few moments, Carol spoke up. "Terry, you have a lovely home here. I never expected." She stopped short, realizing she was falling into old ways of criticizing my situation. Melody gave Carol a disapproving look and spoke for me. "Thank you. It's a wonderful place, passed down in the family for years. Now that Terry is our husband, he's part of that family too." Carol and Mackenzie stared at me in surprise. "Our husband?" Carol asked, confused. "I know that Terry remarried. Which one of you did he marry?" I laughed. "Carol, I'd like you to meet my wife, Mrs. Melody Other." I gestured toward her, and she smiled brightly. "Congrat?" Carol started. I cut her off gently. "And this is my other wife, Mrs. Harmony Other." Yes, you heard me right. I am married to both of these wonderful women. Carol looked shocked. Mackenzie just stared. The girls and I smiled while Kim giggled. After glancing back and forth between us, Carol saw the girls hold up my hands together. She looked at Kim, who nodded. "Oh, yes, Carol. After everything that happened, my brother saved the lives of these amazing women, getting hurt himself in the process. They fell in love with him, so he married them both. Your ex-husband loves them so much that he has twins with each woman and keeps them both very happy." My older sister laughed, and when she said happy, it was clear what she meant. Mackenzie finally spoke. "You mean you're with both of these sisters at the same time?" she asked, trying to make sense of it. "Yes, Mackenzie," Harmony replied, a little giggle escaping her. "Your former dad is with both of us every night. From the very first night, he gave us his love freely. He is our support and gives everything, never asking for much. Neither Melody nor I can understand why you or your mom would have left such a loving man." Mackenzie turned red. Melody jumped in without pausing. "And as a father, oh, Mackenzie, he cherishes those kids more than anything. Harmony and I can't imagine a better man to teach our kids respect in this tough world. He lives for those children. We just don't understand why you would want to leave him." Carol spoke up, her voice bitter. "That's because you have him now." She pointed to the house and gardens. "He has money now, respect. When we were his family, he was just a plumber." Even after all this time, Carol still didn't understand. Harmony's voice turned sharp. "You really are missing the point, Carol." Carol stared at Harmony in disbelief. "We would love Terry the same even if he had nothing. When we fell in love with him, all he had was what was in his truck. For Terry, money doesn't mean much. He treats his family like royalty because he loves us, and we have given him our hearts. We would have left all of this." She gestured like Carol had. "If it meant we couldn't have him. We know that this man, our husband, the same man you turned away, would do anything for us without a second thought. He almost did that the night we met. But can you say the same, Carol? Can you truly say you would do anything for your family, even if it means leaving your comfort zone?" Harmony was glaring at Carol, making her look scared as if she wanted to escape. "You had a man who loved you and would have given you anything," Melody said. "And we know you realize he cares for us deeply and knows us well." Carol turned bright red, and Mackenzie looked everywhere but at us. Kim couldn't help but laugh quietly at the table. Then Kim spoke up. "Everyone, I know we could talk about my brother all night, but we should focus back on Carol and Mackenzie." We all turned to the embarrassed women across from me. "You came here for a reason," my sister said. "But first, how did you find our address? It's not listed for safety reasons." Also, how did you get through the gate? Mom and I came here last week, Mackenzie replied, her face showing little emotion. We watched your office to see when you came and went. When we saw Dad's truck, we followed him here. Tonight we arrived just after he did, before the gate closed. That's a bit unusual, but it did get you here. Still, why are you really here? Kim asked. Mackenzie, your trust says no contact with Terry. You know he doesn't want to see you both. He has been moving on without you for almost a year. About 8 months, I added softly. The girls know I take that time off on Mackenzie's birthday to come here and remember the past. I couldn't bring myself to look at Mackenzie, and a single tear escaped down my cheek. They let him have time to think quietly. He sits with his drink and just stares out at nothing. But when the sun sets, he re-enters our lives, caring for us like he does every day, Melody explained. Her look towards Carol and Mackenzie felt more filled with tension than hate. I dared to glance at Mackenzie. She was looking at me with tears welling up in her eyes. Despite all this time and my efforts to move forward, I felt the old feelings for Mackenzie stir within me. I quickly looked away, determined not to let those emotions return. I had built a new life here with my girls, and I wouldn't let her or her mother disrupt that. My wives held my hands tightly, sensing the storm of feelings rising inside me. What brings you here, Carol Mackenzie? Kim asked, noticing my inner struggle. They exchanged glances. We didn't have much choice, Carol began, staring at the ground. Things have been tough for the last few years. Honestly, they have been really bad. She looked up at us, searching for understanding, but found only blank faces waiting for answers. She sighed and carried on. After Stephen was sentenced, I knew we would never be a couple again. He would be in prison for a long time. So I divorced him. It took a few months, but his lawyers forced us to leave the house since it was his before we got married. We received a bit of money, but it wasn't much. Since then, Mackenzie and I have been living in a 2-bedroom townhouse on the edge of Maitland. Are you looking for pity, Carol? Kim asked. No, Kim, Carol replied quickly, sounding sincere. That last day in court, when Mackenzie learned what Stephen had done, she fell apart. I realized I had ruined any chances I had with Terry. There was no way back for us. I heard he had remarried, but I never thought he would marry both of you. She offered a faint smile. Even at my best, I couldn't compare to either of you, let alone both, and my best days are behind me. She sighed again, hoping for sympathy, but got none. After that day, I understood that I not only lost a man who gave me everything, but I also hurt Terry's relationship with Mackenzie. Her small smile faded, and she stared into space. I could say Stephen encouraged my actions and was the real problem. But that's not true. I could have divorced Terry and married Stephen while helping Mackenzie stay close to her dad. But I knew I had to push Terry away. If I didn't, I wouldn't be able to let go of him. Why? I asked, my voice trembling. I was curious for the first time. I wished I wasn't, but I was. For the first time in many years, I felt Carol look at me. Not just to see what she could gain from me, but to truly consider my feelings. She sighed. Because I still love you, Terry. I knew that if I didn't let go of you, I would want to return one day. The affair with Stephen was exciting, but he only cared about himself. A small smile returned at that thought. But I could sense my wives wanted to respond, and so did I. I squeezed their hands, and they held mine in silence. Carol went on. You were right that day at the courthouse, Terry, when you said I dreamt about you. I dreamed of you coming back, holding me close, So passionate like we used to be when we were younger. She glanced at her daughter. Sorry, Mackenzie, but it's true. I dreamt that your father would come back, forgive me, and we would be together forever. In my dreams, I didn't mind what job he had. I just wanted to feel loved. Sadly, Stephen never really loved us. To him, we were just there to make him look good. They were my dreams. But when I woke up, I faced the reality of my life as Mrs. Stephen Morrison, and I felt like I had to hurt Terry again. Stephen encouraged that feeling, and I didn't realize it was me crying out in my dreams that pushed him too far. I felt little sympathy for her, knowing there would be no chance for us to fix things. Still, her words answered a few of my questions. So, you're divorced and living in an apartment in Maitland. That doesn't explain why you're here, I said. Well, as I said, I knew we had ruined any chance to be close to you. After my divorce from Stephen, I had to stop Mackenzie several times from trying to reach out to you. I didn't want her to lose her trust fund, which helped pay for our place while I worked an office job for a local real estate company. Financially, we were okay, not great, but we were managing as mother and daughter. We accepted our life, and I thought we might never talk to you again. However, about 6 months ago, Mackenzie started getting really tired. She would come home and just collapse. After a few doctor visits, we found out she has a rare kind of bone cancer. She paused for a moment to let that sink in. Same as my mom? I asked, feeling my frustration grow. Yes, Terry. We didn't know it then, but yes, it's the same as your mother's. We ended up at the same doctor, and about 3 months ago, he discovered that you are Mackenzie's biological father. Mackenzie looked at me with fear in her eyes. She was sitting with me but seemed unsure of how to talk to me. She needed something. So, what do you need, Carol? Mackenzie? Is it more money you're after? I asked, feeling angry. Even with the pain of cancer and watching my mother suffer, I was annoyed that everything seemed to revolve around money with them. Harmony touched my arm before I could get more upset. No, honey, for once, I don't think it's money they want. I believe it's you they need. Me? I asked Harmony in surprise. I saw Carol nod as I glanced at Harmony, a curious look on my face. Harmony connected the dots. Yes, Terry, remember when Josephine was nearing the end? They were exploring a new treatment for her type of cancer, which included a bone marrow transplant and some plasma injections to help with the cancer treatment alongside regular chemotherapy. Right, Carol? Yes, Harmony, is it? Carol answered softly. Harmony nodded. That's correct. Our budget for Mackenzie's care is tight, but we can manage. I know you might think I'm being harsh after all we put you through, but Mackenzie wouldn't want me to ask you for money. I wouldn't if it wasn't truly needed. However, we need your consent for tests to see if you might be a match for donating bone marrow for Mackenzie's treatment. There it was. My daughter, someone who had hurt me, needed my help. There was a chance to save her life. When I looked at Mackenzie, she looked back at me with fear in her eyes. She was understandably scared that I would refuse the test, but she might also have been afraid I wouldn't accept her again after everything that had happened. I wasn't sure how I felt. The silence lingered for a few moments as we all lost ourselves in our thoughts. Melody gently stroked my hand. Harmony held me close, sharing her strength with me. Kim, I turned to my sister. Could you take Carol and Mackenzie inside for a moment? I need to talk with my wives. Of course, little brother. Carol, Mackenzie, follow me. She led them inside. Well, my loves, what do you think? I asked when the door closed behind them. Harmony replied, Mackenzie, Isn't well. That's clear. Her skin is pale and she looks a bit undernourished. She shows signs of someone with cancer like your mum. She said it with a frown, knowing it would be hard to hear. Yes, she doesn't look good from the last time I saw her. But I meant, what do you think I should do? I asked. Baby, Melody spoke gently. I understand. They both hurt you. And honestly, I wanted to react strongly just now while listening to your ex-wife. But she still cares about you. She took a breath. But your daughter is sick, and no matter what has happened, you have a chance to help her. Would you really deny her that chance because of your feelings? She was right. I couldn't let my feelings stop me from saving a life. I sighed. No, I wouldn't. When I looked at her, all I saw was my little girl, scared and in pain. I thought my feelings for her were gone, but they weren't. I wrapped my arms around both of my wives. I'm not sure I can do this without both of you. I don't feel strong enough. We're here for you, dear, Harmony said gently. Neither Melody nor I want you to go through this alone. But you need to do one thing first. What is it? I asked. You and Mackenzie should have a talk, just the two of you, Melody added. Harmony agreed with a nod. I felt a wave of panic. This was not something I wanted to do right now. No, I can't. I don't know if I can handle that. Terry, my dear, Melody said softly while hugging me. We believe in you. You need this more than anything else. What about Carol? I asked, trying to shift the topic. Forget about Carol, Melody replied sharply, her earlier warmth gone. She deserves what she has coming for how she treated you. Then she softened her tone. But Mackenzie is still your family. I know it's hard to think about forgiving her, but you could help her with the illness that took your mother. Shouldn't you at least try? I looked at her and sighed. That feels unfair, Melody. Bringing Mom into this? She blushed, but shrugged it off. I may not like Mackenzie much. Our last talk on the phone confirmed that. But I don't want to see her suffer and lose her life. That's a good point. Harmony, do you agree with your sister? I turned to my other wife. She nodded. I do, love. And you should talk to Mackenzie first. You found some closure with Carol outside of court, but I don't think you ever had a chance to talk with Mackenzie. We sat in silence for a few minutes, but I thought there was no better time than now. Okay, could you both ask her to come out and sit with me? Both of them kissed me, and I watched them as they walked back into the house. Finally, I stood up, finished my drink, and moved 2 chairs to the edge of the porch. I sat back down, thinking about what would happen next while looking out over the backyard. A few minutes later, I heard the back door open again. Soft footsteps approached, and then Mackenzie sat down next to me. She offered me a drink. Melody told me to give you this, she said, handing me a drink. She said your other one would be empty. I took it and thanked her. In her other hand, she held a juice. You don't drink? I asked her. Not anymore. I can't with the medication I'm taking, she replied. Once I turned 18, I started drinking rum and Coke like you, but I usually stuck to Bundy because I couldn't afford the nicer stuff. I snorted and glanced back at the gardens. Rum, huh? She sighed. I know this might sound bad after everything that's happened, but I knew you liked rum. At first I didn't like it, but I drank it anyway, because it made me feel connected to you in some small way. I took a sip of my rum, enjoying the taste, while she had her juice. We sat in silence, which felt a bit awkward as we both drifted into our own thoughts. I broke the silence. So, what are you studying at university? I asked. After a moment, she said, I had to take a break this year because of my treatment, but I was studying applied mathematics. I wanted to work in IT, maybe with crypto or data modeling, things like that. For the first time in years, I chuckled at something she said. You know, I have no idea what that means. She laughed too, but it was a bit weak and ended with a cough that reminded me of my mom. She looked at me with a questioning gaze, then took a deep breath, as if she was gathering her courage. I really messed everything up, didn't I, Dad? I winced at her calling me Dad. My heart raced just talking to her. Part of me wanted to play it cool and ignore my feelings. Before I could think too much, I replied, Yes, Pumpkin, you really did. Tears she had been holding back spilled over, and she began to cry. The last time I called her Pumpkin was the morning they both left. I just sat there as she wept, sipping my rum and looking out at the backyard. Inside, my heart was aching, but I kept my face still. After a few minutes, Mackenzie started to calm down, wiping away her tears and pushing her hair back. Her voice softened as she spoke more to herself than to me. I had to lean in to hear. I must be one of the most foolish daughters ever. I wasted so many years with a mother who cared only about her clothes, and a man who only saw me as a trophy. She glanced at me, noticing I was listening, and raised her voice a bit. And look where it got me. A one-way ticket to sadness. I haven't been happy in years, and now that I need my real father, he wants nothing to do with me. I looked at her and chuckled again, and she did too, responding to my laugh. What's so funny? She asked, suddenly looking concerned. I chuckled as we both remembered the last time she asked me that question. Mackenzie, I never stopped caring about you, even though there were times it felt like I did. There was so much pain, and things you and your mother said made me question if you were really my daughter. Even though she didn't feel well, she looked like she might run away from me after that comment. I raised my hand to pause. But I always cared about you. So right now, Mackenzie, I'm scared. I'm scared that if I try to open my heart to you, you'll hurt me again like you did all those years ago. Then why are you laughing? She asked, her voice soft and her eyes looking down. Because you called him a jerk. We rarely use his real name in this house, and when the kids aren't around, that's what we call him. She laughed, and a spark came to her eyes. But then her expression turned serious. Did he really try to hurt you? I nodded and took another sip of my drink. So even after that day in court, your mother never told you what happened? She shook her head. No, I asked, but she wouldn't tell me. Honestly, I don't think she knows the full story even now, and I think she blames herself for part of it. She should, I said firmly, then sighed. I really don't like your mother at all, Mackenzie, and what I'm about to tell you might make you upset with me again, but I have never lied to you, and I'm not going to start now, all right? She nodded, looking a bit scared again. Okay, Dad. I gazed at her and saw her eyes for the first time in years. They were brown like mine, but now they had a hint of gray, probably from her illness or treatment. I let out another sigh. Mackenzie, to be honest, I don't think your mother ever really cared about me, and I'm not sure she understands what true love is. She says she does, but I don't see that she gets what it really means to love someone. When we were in high school, we had so much fun that it was clear we would end up together, and we did. You were born, and we got married. I'm not sure that was the best choice. Mackenzie looked at me, a confused look on her face. You see, I was always meant to be a plumber. It's in my blood. I grew up on job sites, and even now at Delotes, I try to help out when I can. Your mother knew this. I thought she loved me as much as I loved her. But then, things changed. Suddenly, I wasn't good enough anymore. And she moved on without a second thought. And to make it worse, she took you with her. So, love, no, I don't think she really understands it. I looked at Mackenzie, and then out over the garden, taking a sip of my drink. But your mother and I did have 15 good years together. At that time, I loved her deeply. But it didn't work out because she didn't really understand what love was, and always held something back. What do you mean, Dad? What did she hold back? Mackenzie asked. I answered quickly. Her acceptance. Mackenzie looked at me, waiting for more. I continued. I didn't really know what that meant until I met Melody and Harmony. You see, my girls accepted me for who I was with all my flaws and strengths. When I was happy, they laughed with me. When I was sad, they hugged me. But with your mother, she never fully accepted me. I think she cared about me in her own way, fitting me into her perfect life when it was convenient for her, but she never truly accepted me. I could have had a different career or a big business, and I still believe we would have ended things because she could never find peace with what we had. When I got home that day, I thought about giving up once I saw what had happened. I accepted that Carol was leaving, and that hurt, but you chose to leave me and wanted someone else to take my place as your dad. I felt tears welling up, but took a deep breath to hold them back. Mackenzie shook her head, looking like she was about to cry too. There's no excuse for what we did to you. I was only 15 and just following orders. But even at 15, I should have known better and could have questioned it. She didn't cry, but I could sense her shame as she looked down and carried on. When Mom and the other man first told me about moving in with him, I was upset. I didn't understand how I could live with him and still have you as my dad. Over the next few weeks, they kept telling me how great it would be and that you would be okay. They said I would have lots of new things. Mom told me to keep it a secret until it was all settled. So I did. I liked nice things. But they weren't everything to me. I foolishly trusted Mom. After we moved, I asked them to take me to see you. But after a few weeks of them ignoring me, they said I couldn't see you until he adopted me. She was fidgeting, but she kept talking while I sipped my drink and looked out at the gardens. I might have been naive, but I felt something was off. Still, Mom and the other man kept buying me things. They thought new clothes and shiny gifts could fill the empty space from not seeing you. They took me around the city, showing me places I had never been. In the first 6 months, I went to Sydney 3 times, as they tried to make me feel better. At night in my room, I missed you and cried, when I thought you didn't want me. Hearing her talk made me feel weak, but I also felt a quiet anger growing inside me, directed at Carol and the other man. I tried to let my feelings soften only for Mackenzie as I said, "Oh dear, that was never true. I wasn't allowed to see you. The restraining order meant I had to stay away from the other man, your mother, and you. If I had broken that order, I could have ended up in jail. I thought you didn't want me. Your mother." We sat quietly as that thought faded away. Mackenzie, I'm trying to understand. This is the first time we have really talked since everything started years ago. I sat and thought about all the pieces of past conversations and documents I had gathered over time, and it started to feel like some things were finally making sense. Can I ask you something? If you don't want to answer, that's okay. Dad, if you need to know, no matter how hard it is, I'll answer if I can, she replied, her voice almost urgent. A few months after I left, I came back to see your grandmother. You didn't know, but she had just finished her first cancer treatment. You saw me in Maitland Central. Mackenzie lowered her head, clearly embarrassed. What happened? If you were so upset, why did you treat me that way? It took her a moment to respond. I could see a mix of shame and pain, but also some anger directed at me. Finally, she took a deep breath. I sensed that there would be a lot of this during our conversation. When I first saw you, you were laughing at something on your phone. It had been months since I saw you. If you think back to when we came to see you after the divorce, just before you moved. I nodded. We saw you buy your truck that day, and you let both Mom and me have it. I nodded again. I cried for days after because I couldn't understand why you didn't want me as your daughter. I thought I had done something to push you away. I was upset because you just left. I wanted to say something, but Mackenzie held up her hand and stopped me. She shook her head. I know now that you left because of how hurt we made you. Just like Mom said earlier, we three did our best to break you. Each of us for different reasons, but we all did. Something inside me broke when you hit your truck, showing me how much I had hurt you. When you just left, it was never mended. Honestly, Dad, it's still broken today. But when I saw you in the cafe that morning, you looked so happy. Watching you, it felt like I never meant anything to you. So to me, it wasn't fair. You were happy, and I wasn't. She looked at me and tilted her head. I know it might not matter, but can you tell me what you were laughing at that day? I smiled. Sure. I took out my phone and looked through my photos. I found the one of the girls. Melody and Harmony had been looking after me, helping me after an accident. I'll tell you about it later. By the time they sent me this picture, they both were joking around with me. I showed Mackenzie the photo of my friends smiling under a sheet. Mackenzie smiled back. You really got lucky with them. Then her smile faded as she continued her story. When I saw you smiling, you didn't seem upset like I was. I knew Dickhead and Mom were right behind me talking about how you might run away. I kind of lost it. Mom had only been married to Dickhead a short time, but he was putting you down every chance he got. He called you a bad father who would leave his daughter a poor partner and a terrible husband. Mom always backed him up. So, when I saw you happy while I was feeling sad, it made me angry. I took it out on you thinking if I wasn't happy, you shouldn't be either. I'm sorry, Dad. I went too far. Yes, you did, I replied. She continued, her hurt clear on her face. When we got home, Dickhead was yelling about how he would ruin you. You had already cost him a lot of money when you left the hospital with that couple. They were important donors to the hospital, and losing that money affected us too. That couple was William and Martha, Melody and Harmony's parents. Her eyes widened. Did you know that then? I shook my head and smiled. No, I found out later. But back to you, you and your mom came to see me the next day, and you seemed like a different person. You were more like the Mackenzie I remembered, not the one I had seen at the cafe. What happened? She nodded. I felt terrible that night and cried myself to sleep again. I knew I had hurt you again. When I heard Mom say she would go to my grandparents to get my college money from you, I wanted to go with her. I needed to say I was sorry. I wanted to escape the mess my life was becoming. She seemed lost in thought, and together we sat in silence, reflecting on the events of that weekend. Finally, I wasn't sure if Mackenzie would speak up, so I encouraged her. When you and your mom drove away, I hoped we could reconnect. But then your birthday came. Her voice was filled with sadness. My birthday. I really messed that up, didn't I? I chuckled lightly. Yes, you did. That was when I felt all the love I had for you fade away. I paused. Or so I thought. She looked at me, trembling a bit. I wanted to comfort her, but I couldn't. Instead, we had to navigate through our memories to find out if there was hope or sorrow at the end. Her voice wavered as she spoke. I know, Dad. Back then, I felt justified in my actions. Now all I feel is shame. At that time, the guy had just come home after being released from custody. He and Mom were yelling your name, but I think it was for different reasons. They both blamed you for their problems. And what hurt more was their talk about money issues. I am ashamed to admit that I got used to new clothes, and Mom taught me to expect them. I had no idea he had tried to hurt you. She paused. He really did, didn't he? Yes, I replied, shaking my head. He almost succeeded. I really did lose my life twice from what he injected me with. My heart stopped twice while I was in the hospital. But I am here today because of an incredible medical team and some care from Harmony. So, Mackenzie, about that text. She groaned, clearly uneasy about the subject and her mistakes. Dad, I want to hear more about what he did, but I know this is about you. On my birthday, I saw your number pop up and I knew it was you. But just 10 minutes earlier, Mom and the guy were arguing loudly about you. When I heard your message, I got angry, wondering why you would hurt us. Did you hate us that much? The guy had been telling me that now that I was 17, I could sue you for money, so I sent the text. It was one of the worst things I've ever done. Until we were in that courtroom, I thought I was right. And you were just a bitter father wanting revenge on us. Her voice was quieter now. I never knew the truth until that day in court. I never allowed myself to see that we were the ones in the wrong. I could hear the pain in her voice. I never truly thought I would lose you, until I heard he tried to hurt you. At that point, I felt completely broken. I remembered that day when Mackenzie started crying as we shared our story in court, and she continued to cry even as the session was wrapped up, and they led her and her mother into a different hallway. She went on, sadness woven into every word. I didn't even know about the offer and the trust fund until a few days later when the lawyer the guy got for me tried to explain it. All I could do was look at you. I didn't hear anything else. When I learned about the situation, I became very upset. I told them I didn't want to be part of it. It was my mom who convinced me to agree, saying I would never have your love again, so I should take the money instead. She looked at me as I sat there. I would have broken that agreement many times just to hear you say my name and get a hug from you, Dad. I didn't want your money. I just wanted to go back to when you cared about me, so I could be your daughter again. With that, she broke down in tears. She sobbed deeply, saying, I just wanted to be your little girl. I just wanted my dad. She held her arms around herself, breathing hard and moving side to side, lost in her sadness. I watched her for a moment, trying to stay calm, trying to look strong. But soon I couldn't hold back my feelings. The love I had for my daughter, which had been buried for so long, suddenly filled me with warmth as I saw her so upset. I reached over and with great effort moved her chair next to mine, lifted her like she was light, and held her close. Her cries turned into deep wails. I wrapped my arms around her and held her on my lap. She pressed her fists to my chest and cried for the next 10 minutes. I rocked her back and forth like I did when she was a little child. I didn't want to let her go, and my tears fell as we both sat on the porch, crying together. In that moment, I would not have let her go for anything. As the moon began to rise, our emotions calmed down. Our sobs turned into quiet sniffles, and Mackenzie relaxed against me. During all the time since my journey had begun, I rarely allowed myself to dream about holding my daughter again. It felt like part of my heart had returned. With my eyes closed, I held Mackenzie gently, rocking with her, when I felt Melody's hand on my shoulder. My wife smiled sweetly at me, her eyes filled with pride for both me and Mackenzie. "I'm sorry, my love. I know this moment is special for you both, but the kids want to come and say goodnight." Mackenzie looked up at me through her tears and managed a smile. She glanced at Melody, a bit anxious, but letting me go. She tried to smile in a way that didn't seem like she would cry again if I stood up. "It's okay, Dad. We both needed that. If you need to put the kids to bed and promise me you will come back so we can keep talking, you can go say goodnight." I prepared to get up. Melody smiled and said, "I'll stay out here with her if you want." I turned to Mackenzie. "Actually, Mackenzie, would you like to help me get your brothers and sisters ready for bed?" Both girls looked surprised. "Dad, I'm not sure if I can. There's so much to do." I cut in. "I know, Pumpkin, but I'd rather have you with me right now than staying out here. We can keep talking after everyone is settled." Melody helped Mackenzie and me up, and the three of us walked back inside. Everyone turned to look at us as we came in. We had been outside for almost an hour, and everyone noticed the tears on our cheeks and our red eyes. Carol quickly got up and approached us. "It's nice to see you two talking," she began. "Carol, it's time for my kids to go to bed, and Mackenzie and I need to keep discussing things." She nodded. "I understand, Terry. I can wait." I shook my head. "Carol, this will take some time. Mackenzie and I have important matters to discuss, and my family has been very kind to you lately. I think it would be better if you return to your hotel for tonight." She looked at Mackenzie, then back to me, ignoring everyone else. "Okay, Terry, Mackenzie and I can come back tomorrow." I felt Mackenzie grip my arm tighter. I knew what to do. "Sorry, Carol, but we want to talk tonight. You don't need to stay. Mackenzie can stay here with us, and we'll take care of her." Carol's expression changed, and I could see her frustration return. "What do you mean, Terry? My daughter needs me here. I brought her here, and you can't just ask me to leave." "Why not?" Harmony interjected, stepping into the room. She crossed her arms and shot a challenging look at Carol, but smiled at me. "Terry, the kids are ready for their story now, so don't take too long." Then she walked away, and I noticed Melody chuckling behind me, knowing what I was thinking. Mackenzie cleared her throat. "Mom, it's fine. I'm not a kid anymore. I'm 22. Dad and his family will take care of me. We can meet up in town tomorrow." She stood tall, but kept her grip on my hand. "Right now, I need to talk to Dad. It's been almost 7 years, and I can't let this moment slip away." "But," Carol started. "No buts, Mom. You're not helping. And with what Dad and I are discussing, having you here will make things harder." My ex-wife glared at me, clearly unhappy. "What have you been telling her, Terry?" "Not much, Carol. Actually, Mackenzie has been saying most of the things. It's interesting to hear her talk about her past, especially about being adopted when she was so young." I paused for a moment to let that sink in. Carol looked upset. She probably thought if she got kicked out, Mackenzie would go too. I had wondered about that an hour ago, but now I hoped things could improve with my daughter after our earlier talk and the emotional hugs we shared. Mackenzie spoke again. "Mom, it's okay, but I think you should go so I can spend some time with Dad. I'll be all right." Without waiting for a response, Mackenzie took her mother to the door and out to her car before tensions could rise. I was halfway through reading The Very Hungry Caterpillar to the kids when Mackenzie returned with Melody. I paused, allowing Melody to sit next to me like always. Harmony was on my other side, and to my surprise, Mackenzie joined the kids in the middle of the floor. By the end of the story, the kids were curious about the new woman. Adam, John, Grace, and Beth. This is your big sister, Mackenzie Morrison. She is my daughter from my first marriage before I met your moms, I introduced her. Actually, it's Mackenzie Brown, she corrected me. I raised my eyebrows in surprise. We also introduced Candace and Holly, her cousins. The kids were excited and asked her many questions typical of young minds. They wondered how she could be my daughter and an adult at the same time. Young Grace asked the question that made everyone pause. Sister Mackenzie, what's wrong with your hair? I had noticed that Mackenzie hadn't taken off her hat all night, but we all gasped when she did. Underneath was a wig of brown hair, and she revealed that she was bald, a common result of her cancer treatment. She gently touched Grace's arm. Grace, I am very sick, and the medicine makes my hair fall out. Does it hurt? Adam asked. It hurts a little, Mackenzie smiled. But I try to be as brave as I can. For a little while longer, the kids asked questions about their new big sister until Kim walked in. She did a double take when she saw Mackenzie's bald head, but quickly adjusted, clapping her hands. All right, kids, that's enough for now. Leave Mackenzie alone. You can talk to her in the morning. But it's past your bedtime, so off to sleep. After the kids were tucked in, Mackenzie gave my dad a big hug. When he saw her bald head and realized that she had the same cancer as Mom, I watched my usually calm dad become emotional as he held his granddaughter for the first time in almost 7 years. They spoke softly for a while. And then John, along with William and Martha, said goodnight and went to bed. Martha hugged me on the way out and whispered, I know you're hurting again, Terry. I also know you are confused. But you're doing the right thing. She needs you to help her feel better. I nodded and hugged my mother-in-law tightly. Paul and Kim also left, telling us they would keep an eye on the kids and give us more time to chat. Melody, Harmony, Mackenzie, and I went back outside and sat down. Mackenzie, is it okay if we sit with you and your dad? Melody asked. She nodded. Yes. Sorry, I can't tell you both apart. The girls laughed. It's okay. For most people, it takes a while. I'm Melody, and this is my sister Harmony. Then, in a whisper, she added, If you want an easy way to tell us apart when you're with your dad, I usually sit on his right side while Harmony always sits on his left. Why is that? Mackenzie asked. We told her about my fateful drive and our meeting in the storm. I showed her the jagged scar on the back of my left arm, which Harmony took care of when it first happened. She always tended to my left side in those early days. So that became her seat, and Melody took my right. So that's the reason I am always on his left, Harmony concluded the story. Mackenzie wiped tears from her face as she looked at me, feeling sad for everything I had been through for her mother and herself. Then she looked at the three of us and tilted her head. So, are the three of you together? Yes, all three of us said together, sharing a smile. So, how does that work? My daughter asked. Do you sleep in the same room or what? Oh no, sweetie, Harmony explained. We all sleep in the same bed. From the moment we met, we've always done that. So, how does it work? You know? She asked, a little shy. The girls laughed. You mean how we share time with your dad? Melody asked, her mood changing to serious. My daughter blushed. Yeah? Melody leaned in a bit. Mackenzie, what you need to know is that Harmony and I share your father equally. There is no separation between us. We support each other and care for him together. She leaned back, smiled again, looked at me, and blew a kiss. I caught it in my hand and placed it on my cheek before blowing one back. Harmony reached over and gently touched my cheek with the air kiss I had sent her way. "You see," Melody said as she glanced at Mackenzie, "just like in a traditional marriage, we are a united family, and my sister and I love your father completely. So, how do you work with the law?" Mackenzie asked, curious. I jumped in to explain. "Well, technically I am married to Harmony. That is what the government recognizes. But we also have a special legal agreement created by Aunt Kim, which we all signed. This agreement gives Melody the same rights as Harmony. It can't be registered as a marriage, but it is still legal. Honestly, I don't understand all of it, but Aunt Kim can explain if you want." Mackenzie looked down, a bit gloomy. "I don't think Aunt Kim likes me much after everything that happened." "It's all right, Mackenzie," Harmony said kindly. "It's true that Kim and Paul will need time to adjust to you. You did some things that hurt your dad, and they had to support him during that time." Mackenzie looked like she was about to cry. Harmony continued, speaking gently. "But in our family, we acknowledge our mistakes. We have to talk about them, deal with the issues, and move forward. You still have some making up to do, including with Kim. And honestly, Melody and I have had our doubts about you, too." Mackenzie seemed close to tears, but held them back, nodding silently. Harmony stood up, moved to her, and sat next to her, pulling her into a comforting hug. Harmony lowered her voice again, speaking as she did to our children. "But what we saw tonight was something we never expected between our dear husband and you. We've seen a start to healing. That wouldn't have happened if you hadn't been completely honest with your father. He has been hurt deeply, but he isn't a harsh person. If he can forgive you, then we, his wives, can do the same." Melody leaned against me and hugged my arm while Mackenzie hugged Harmony tightly. Mackenzie was crying again, clinging to Harmony as if they had been friends for a long time. Harmony closed her eyes and held her tightly, just as I had before. "It's all right, sweetie. Let it all out," she said gently, kissing the top of Mackenzie's head. After a little while, Harmony opened her eyes, looked at me, and smiled. Mackenzie's face was red, and tears were falling down. She was holding on to Harmony as if she needed her support. Mackenzie's eyes looked to me, asking for help, then to Melody, and then back to Harmony before she looked down at her lap. "I am so sorry to all of you," she said softly. "Daddy, I love you so much. And even though I can't change what has happened, I want to try and make things right with whatever time I have left." "Mackenzie," Harmony said gently, "everything will be okay. We are here for you no matter what comes next. Let's hope for the best and that you have plenty of time to reconnect with your dad. But let's not talk like that anymore. Deal?" She smiled softly at Harmony as Harmony handed her a napkin from the table to wipe her face. "Deal," Mackenzie replied. We sat together for a few moments. Melody rested against me, leaning on my shoulder and occasionally kissing it. After a while, I lifted her chin and gave her a soft kiss on the lips. Mackenzie watched us and giggled. "Looks like my dad really likes redheads." We all laughed, and Melody said, "Well, that's clear, Mackenzie. Your dad is married to both of us." "No, I mean redheads because Mom was also a redhead." Melody looked at her curiously. "But we've met Carol. She's not a redhead. She's more of a dark blonde." I felt a rush of embarrassment, knowing where this conversation was headed. Mackenzie caught on too. Now Harmony was giving me a look, and soon both my wives were looking at me in disbelief. "No way," they said together in that special way only twins have when they figure something out. "The carpet doesn't match the curtains," I said, laughing and shaking my head. Melody lightly slapped my arm. You sly dog all these years and you never told us. Honestly, I've mostly been thinking about my two favorite redheads and trying to forget my ex-wife. I could tell by the looks I got from both of my girls that they understood, and Mackenzie was giving me a "dad, that's too much information" look. Melody turned to Mackenzie. How did you figure this out? Mackenzie looked a bit shy. I guess you all are open about your bodies, and I've learned not to be embarrassed in the hospital. When I was 14, I asked Mom about something. I usually have brown hair, but I had some lighter red underneath. Mom told me it was normal, and that I got my coloring from her. We all laughed, but then Mackenzie's expression changed. Dad, her voice turned serious again. If I had known back then what I know now about Mom, already being with that guy, wanting to leave you and trying to adopt me, I would have stood up to her and chosen to stay with you. I've missed so many years of feeling loved and cared for, knowing him more than just a burden. We looked at her with surprise, knowing that the man would never truly care for her like a real father. We always thought Carol put her needs first. After a moment, Mackenzie took a deep breath. I know that Mom loves me and cares for me. But even with my cancer, I often feel like I am more about her image than anything else. At first, I was just the new daughter of Dr. Dickhead. We all laughed at that. But then it changed. Everyone was saying, my daughter has cancer, and it felt like I was just a reason for gossip. But in these last few hours, I have been able to talk, cry, and even laugh. It has hurt just as much, if not more, than the cancer treatments. I didn't like recalling some things I had done to my dad. She looked at me and then back down at the table. But I didn't feel rejected by any of you. With Mom, whenever things got tough, she would leave the room and leave me to handle it alone. It felt like she was ashamed of me. She turned to us and said, I have not been fair to you all, especially Dad. I realized I was so rude. I need to say sorry to the three of you because even with all my mistakes, I have felt more love here in less than a day than in 7 years with Mum and Dickhead. Everyone went quiet. We will get there, Pumpkin. It will take time. But we will get there, okay? I said, and my partners nodded in agreement. Why is your last name Brown now? Harmony asked Mackenzie. It was Carol's maiden name, I answered before Mackenzie could respond. She just nodded. After everything that happened, I couldn't ask Dad to let me take my old last name back. So when Mom divorced Dickhead, I removed his last name, Morrison, and took Mom's maiden name. She choked up a bit. Even then, Mom wasn't happy. She wanted me to keep Dickhead's last name because he had adopted me and was my legal dad. She thought part of his estate should belong to me since she wouldn't get much from the divorce. We all sat in silence for a few minutes, each lost in our thoughts. Eventually, we moved on to happier topics. We shared stories about our time together. We talked about how we met and what it was like dating and being seen around town. We recalled our trips to the U.S. and Europe, how the girls tried to teach me to ski, and how I kept falling until I switched to snowboarding. Finally, we just shared details of our everyday lives with the kids. Around 10, I noticed that Mackenzie wanted to keep talking, but she looked exhausted. I walked her to a guest bedroom and showed her the bathroom and towels for the morning. Grandpa's room is the next door down, and our room is next to the kids' room if you need anything, okay, Pumpkin? I told Mackenzie. Before she could answer, she hugged me tightly. I love you, Daddy, she said, and I wrapped my arm around her. I love you too, but you need some rest. We'll talk more in the morning. All right? All right, she replied. We said our last good night, and when I got to my bedroom, the girls were already in bed. I took a quick shower and put on some light cotton shorts. I climbed into the middle of the bed and my girls snuggled in, one on each side. "I checked on the kids a few minutes ago," Melody said with a smile. "None of them are in their beds. They are all in a pile on the floor. Uncle Paul set it up for them." I kissed her. "Thank you, my love. I feel bad that all this happened on family BBQ night." "Don't worry," Harmony said, leaning in for her kiss. "Tonight was surprising, but I saw something wonderful that I never thought I would see." Melody and I looked at her, curious. "I saw our man's spirit lifted. No matter how much we love you, the gap that Mackenzie left was something we couldn't fill. And tonight, we saw a bit of you come back." That night I fell asleep holding my wives close, and I slept deeply and peacefully. The next morning, the family got the kids ready for breakfast downtown. Harmony, Mackenzie, and I went to the hospital early to get my test done for matching with Mackenzie's treatment. It would take about 2 days to get the results. Carol called Mackenzie, and she let her know that she was with me for the test and would update her later. I sensed a distance between mother and daughter that I had never noticed before. After our talks the night before, I realized that as Mackenzie and I were reconnecting, the gap between her and Carol might grow, likely due to the things we were learning about how we had been treated. We met the family at one of our favorite breakfast spots. Everyone was there, and I smiled, seeing 3 generations together. It was lively, with kids running around, parents and grandparents enjoying their coffee, and the staff trying to keep up. I noticed that Mackenzie always sat close to me during those early days. Melody or Harmony would often give up their spot so Mackenzie could sit beside me. A few times when we had our 4 children on our laps, little Grace would always want to be next to Mackenzie and followed her whenever she could. Out of my 4, she took a special liking to her older half-sister and always wanted to be around her. Carol joined us at one point but didn't stay long. I think it was the way my girls looked at her and how Mackenzie kept telling her that she was fine and didn't need her constant attention. When Carol started talking about how tough it had been for her and how much she had to sacrifice for Mackenzie's treatment, everyone seemed to ignore her, including Mackenzie. 2 days later, when my test results arrived, everything changed with Carol. I found out I was a perfect match for Mackenzie, and if we acted quickly, we could fit into her treatment schedule without much trouble. Since Mackenzie's doctor was already in Sydney, I arranged to take a week off work to bring Mackenzie for the first step in her treatment in just 2 days. "You can't be serious, Terry. Mackenzie and I can't just go to Sydney like that. I need to organize things," Carol complained as we explained our plans. We were on my back deck while Harmony helped Mackenzie pack some essentials, and Melody looked after the kids with Paul and Kim. "Carol, this isn't up for discussion. We're going to do this no matter your plans. This is a chance to get treatment the day after tomorrow in Sydney." "Terry, we have to get everything ready, book hotels." "I can't be there, so it won't work," she said, her frustration clear. I smiled and said, "That's not a problem. You don't need to be there." "What do you mean?" Carol asked, surprised. "You're not the one who needs the treatment. Mackenzie and I are. I'll take care of all the travel and accommodation. But I have to be there." She was becoming more upset, and her old anger was showing. "What right do you have to decide what I can do with my daughter?" Carol scolded. "Remember, she's not your daughter anymore, so step back, Terry. She can't go until I say so." Carol crossed her arms and glared at me. Mackenzie approached and said, "Mom, would you actually stop me from getting the best treatment just because it's not convenient for you?" She looked serious. "And don't speak that way to someone who can help me no matter what he is to you." Carol seemed taken aback, having not realized Mackenzie was there. Well, dear, of course not. Terry was being a bit difficult, so I was just pointing out a few things, she said, flustered but managing a smirk at me. Mackenzie sat down beside me, and Carol struggled to contain her emotions as Mackenzie held my hand. So these points you mentioned, Mackenzie said. It sounded like you were reminding Dad that you made him give me up. Mackenzie's expression was serious. Is it because you made my teenage daughter sign adoption papers that took me away from my father? For a few minutes, the girls exchanged hurtful words until Mackenzie lost her temper. You lied, Mom, she shouted, her voice filled with anger. All these years I thought Dad stayed away because he didn't want us. I believed he left and never looked back because you and that man said he was just a poor plumber, not a real man. But it was you. You are the one who lied. You cheated on my father with someone who wasn't right for you. Mackenzie had been thinking a lot lately, and she faced her mother. Carol seemed confused. When Dad and I talked the other night, and as we've kept talking these past few days, we've shared a lot. Mackenzie paused for a moment. From talking to him, I can see now that you never loved Dad. And looking back at how you treated me and how you pushed me, it was almost as wrong as what we did to him. I honestly wonder if you even love me. Mackenzie said this with strong feelings. Mackenzie, sweetie, how could you? Carol began, but she was losing control of the situation quickly. Easily, Mackenzie interrupted. These last few days reconnecting with Dad, talking with Melody and Harmony, meeting my little brothers and sisters, she smiled at me. I've felt more love and acceptance here than I ever did with you or that man I feel ashamed to call my father. Mackenzie Grace Brown, Carol exclaimed, standing up in disbelief. How dare you? Who has taken you to the hospital, made sure you get your medicine? Who drove you here to ask your dad for help? Yes, Mom, that was you. But let me ask this. Was there ever a time you took me to the hospital that you didn't take a selfie for Facebook or Instagram? Have you ever truly cared without seeking sympathy online? Were you ever not looking for pity from the staff when you picked up my medicine? Carol opened her mouth, but words wouldn't come out. And it took me almost 6 weeks to get you to drive here to ask Dad for help. You kept saying he wouldn't want anything to do with us. Both you and that man acted like you didn't care about me, unless it was easy for you. Mackenzie looked directly at her mother. On paper, it may say he is my father, but I know who really supported me. Despite everything, he never hesitated to help, even after all that happened. That's not fair, Mackenzie. You're being unfair, Carol protested. It was my idea to help you, and I was the one who made sure we left Stephen's house when he went to jail. I drove us down here. Just because Terry is a match doesn't mean he can make decisions without talking to me first. He is talking to you, Mom, Mackenzie said, feeling frustrated. That's what this conversation is about. There's a chance for Dad and me to get the procedure done before my next treatment. He wants to help me. Why don't you? Carol was quiet for a moment, then her gaze turned to me. I knew it, she shouted. This is all your fault, Terry. Not even a week after we come here to ask for your help, you're turning her against me. I'm not doing anything like that, Carol, I replied calmly. That's not true, Terry. My daughter couldn't do anything without me a week ago. Now she wants to leave for Sydney with a man who hasn't cared about her in 7 years. Mom, Mackenzie yelled. This has nothing to do with you. So, can you just listen for once? I need this procedure, or I could be in real trouble. We watched as Carol seemed to lose her confidence. Mackenzie tried a different approach. Mom, do you remember about 6 months after we left Dad? Carol gave her a fierce look. Mackenzie raised her hand to pause. Yes, Mom. We left Dad. He didn't leave us. What we did caused him to come down here." She let that idea sink in, then continued. "Do you remember just before the divorce was final? I was begging you to take me to see Dad. You insisted he was happier without us. So you and your boyfriend took me to Sydney to keep me busy. You both took me out. But guess what?" Carol looked at her. "You never asked what I wanted to do. I was sad for my father. You took me for dinner and a show, but it was all about you two, not about me." Carol shook her head. "No, it wasn't, sweetie. It was for you. You were just a teenager. How could you know what you wanted?" "You just needed to ask," Mackenzie replied angrily. "If you had asked, I would have loved to do so many things. But do you know what hurt the most on that trip?" She paused for effect. "That night your boyfriend decided to take you out without me. And you didn't even seem to care. You laughed at the idea. You left a sad 15-year-old alone for hours in a hotel room, never asking if I wanted to join you or if I could get something to eat. You didn't even check on me when you returned." She shook her head at the memory. Carol looked blank. I tried to stay neutral, hoping neither noticed me. "When we got back to Maitland, your boyfriend scolded me in front of you for ordering some ice cream while both of you were out. Do you remember what you said when he got upset with me?" Carol looked down and shook her head. "You said," I said, mimicking her tone, "Stephen, dear, she will know better next time, and ask before doing something for herself that affects us." I shared a look of disbelief with Mackenzie. "Know my place," Mackenzie said softly. "That's what you said. After that, you and Dickhead went to court, and things didn't go your way. Then you both blamed Dad to everyone around you. I was still feeling hurt, but went along with it because I was confused. I loved you, Mom," she sighed. "And with you making me think that Dad didn't want me, I tried to stick close to you and make you happy. Even when I was struggling, we both made mistakes." "Listen, Mackenzie," Carol said, glancing at me for support, but I just stared back at her blankly. "This is not the right time. Are you serious, Mom? 7 years, even taking into account your affair, and you're saying we can't talk about this? It's just us here. Everyone else is leaving us alone. If we can't talk now, when can we?" Carol again looked frustrated. Finally, I decided to step in. "Carol, I think you need to see that Mackenzie has some things to sort out, just like we do, probably even more than us. We were adults then, but she had to face all of this as a teenager. She didn't have it hard," Carol shot back. "We gave her everything, clothes, trips, the best schools." "And what about love?" I replied. She had that too. Stephen and I loved her. We gave her everything we could. I think you're missing what love really is. Can't you see it after all our talks? Mackenzie didn't need things. She didn't need to be treated like an object. She needed your time and thoughtfulness. Being a loving parent means understanding what she needs more than what you want." I glanced over at the house where my wives and kids were. "I've learned over the past 7 years that love means doing for others to show you care. It means accepting who they are and what they choose to do because you care about them." I sighed and looked back at Carol. "When you came the other day with Mackenzie and told me about her illness, I had to push aside so much pain to even consider saying yes." Mackenzie gasped and squeezed my arm. "I thought both of you were out of my life for good. But now I have a good job that I enjoy and 4 amazing kids that I can raise better than I thought I could. Plus, I have 2 wonderful wives who love me deeply more than you ever did." It was my time to express my feelings, so I made my point clear. Years ago, I was sitting here with Kim, talking about my daughters and how they matter to me. I looked at Mackenzie and gently patted her hand before turning to Carol. Back then, I was falling in love with both of you. I struggled to understand how I could be with both at the same time. Then, Kim said, "Double or nothing." I agreed, but it means so much more to me now than it did then. Carol, I've come to realize that those words have a deeper meaning. You left me with nothing. I walked away empty-handed, but when Melody and Harmony came into my life, I took a chance, even though it was hard to open up. You mentioned that I have everything now, and you are right. I have money, 2 wonderful wives who are so much better than you, and 4 children I love dearly. Carol looked shocked, but I continued. I have a great house, and despite everything, I have a chance to rebuild my relationship with Mackenzie. I can help her, but if it hurts your feelings, you need to know something. Carol's eyes were fixed on me. I'm okay with hurting your feelings. Mackenzie laughed beside me just before Carol could respond. Listen, Mum, this might be hard to hear, but Dad is taking me to Sydney tonight, and we'll go through the procedure tomorrow evening. I think Dad was right. It's better if you go home, and he can take care of me for a while. Carol kept arguing. She couldn't see past her own feelings. Our conversation turned into a real argument. The more she protested, the wider the gap grew between her and her daughter. From what Mackenzie shared and other stories I've heard since that first weekend, I've realized that what Carol and her partner did was nearly abusive. I understand that families can fight and disagree. I had 2 lovely wives with strong personalities. They could be fierce. But the key is that families should be responsible. You can't leave a child alone in a strange city without supervision. Carol didn't see that, and that's where things began to go wrong. Later that evening, Melody, Mackenzie, and I headed to the airport for Sydney. Harmony wanted to come too, but someone had to stay with the kids. And it seems she lost a game of chance to her sister. The procedure itself was simple for me. They put me to sleep and took some marrow to put into Mackenzie's body, hoping she would accept it. I started giving blood donations after each of Mackenzie's chemotherapy sessions. The idea was that my blood could help her body heal faster. I didn't know much about the science, but it had worked for other patients, so we decided to try it. After her treatments, Mackenzie chose to come to Bathurst with us, which surprised her mother. Carol thought Mackenzie would go back to Maitland after her first visit. The next few months were a bit awkward. Mackenzie moved in, and it took everyone time to get used to that. She arranged for her belongings to be sent to her, not wanting her mother to handle it. During the day, she spent a lot of time with the kids and would often join my daughters and me in the evenings. We talked a lot about her experiences with her mom and the tough times she faced. My daughters and I were shocked by some of her stories. Mackenzie and I shared many tears as we grew closer again. Overall, I was happy to have her back in my life, but everything changed on my birthday. I woke up early to unexpected but pleasant surprises. Melody was beside me, smiling. She greeted me cheerfully, wishing me a happy birthday. Harmony was there too, sharing in the celebration. There was laughter and joy as we began the day together. After getting ready, we headed downstairs to find the kids having breakfast. William, Martha, and Mackenzie exchanged knowing looks. "Happy birthday, Daddy," my kids exclaimed in unison. For the next 20 minutes, I focused on their gifts, which were sweet and heartfelt, including socks and a colorful card covered in crayon drawings. Melody gave me a brand new Remington 308 rifle, as I had taken up target shooting about a year ago. Harmony surprised me with a beautiful 16x50 scope, which I could tell must have cost a lot. William and Martha had gotten me a spotting scope for the shooting range, and I don't know how Mackenzie managed it, but she got me a high-quality bipod stand. So now I had everything I needed for long-range target shooting. I sat on the couch, ready to open my gifts, when Mackenzie came over. She seemed nervous as she sat down on the coffee table next to my presents. "What's wrong, Pumpkin?" I asked. Without saying anything, she handed me another gift. This one looked old, with worn wrapping paper that was close to falling apart. I blinked in surprise. Tears filled her eyes as she said, "This is for you, Dad." I opened the card and she explained, "I wrote this the week before your birthday over 7 years ago." The card was simple, with a golf ball on the front. Inside, there was a handwritten note. "Dad, I don't know what I did to make you not want to see us these last few months. I really miss you. But Mom says we can't talk to you because soon Stephen will be my new dad. I'm not sure I want a new dad. I miss my old one. I hope you have a happy birthday. I love you, Dad. Your daughter, Mackenzie." I gently put the card down and looked at Mackenzie, then at the gift. The room was quiet. Even her little siblings were watching closely. I slowly unwrapped the present, revealing 3 items inside. The first was a plain black cotton shirt. I had mentioned wanting a comfortable shirt to wear after a shower, and I guessed Mackenzie had heard me talking with her mother. The second item was a pair of cotton shorts with little hearts on them. The third was a small pocket knife, a handy tool with multiple functions. It had an inscription on the side that read, "My Dad, Terry Love, Mackenzie." I looked at Mackenzie again, then back down at the gifts, filled with emotion. "Thank you," I managed to say. I pulled her into a tight hug, causing her to nearly tumble off the coffee table. We were both crying. I whispered, "I love you, Pumpkin." Melody picked up the card, read the message on the knife, and joined in the hug. Harmony soon followed. For over 7 years, Mackenzie had held on to that gift, unsure if she could ever share it. Finally, little Beth came over to us as we sat on the couch and gave me one of her little hugs. She looked up at me and then at Mackenzie, then at Melody. "Mummy, did Dad not like Sister Mac's present?" she asked. "No, sweetie," Melody replied. "I think he likes Sister Mackenzie's gift the most." "Better than mine?" John asked, sounding curious. We all laughed. "I love all your gifts the same, but Dad has been waiting for that one for a long time, and your big sister was finally able to give it to me," I told them. We settled the kids, and Martha kindly offered to take them to daycare, giving Melody, Harmony, and me a break from our usual parenting duties. So Mackenzie and I decided to go into town for a birthday brunch and maybe do some shopping. While we were getting ready, the next surprise of the day came. "Terry, there's a man at the front door with a package that needs your signature," Melody said, looking curious. I laughed. "It's probably another birthday gift. I hope this one is cash." I signed for an envelope, and the man said thanks, but seemed to hesitate. "Is there something else?" "Yes, sir. I need you to read the letter inside and let me know which time you'd like for a call," the courier replied. I opened the envelope, wondering what the surprise was, and started reading the letter. "You have to be kidding me," I exclaimed, and not happily. "What is it, dear?" Harmony asked, coming down the hall with some shoes in her hands. "The guy is asking for a video call today. He says he has something important to tell me." I looked again at the letter. He picked 3 times, 10:30, 12:30, or 3:30 today, using something called Microsoft Teams. I turned to the courier. "You're not just a delivery guy, are you?" "No, sir," he replied. "I'm actually from the Department of Corrections. If you agree to one of the times, you'll provide instructions to connect with the person." He looked a bit uncomfortable. I'm sorry for the bad timing. We were going out. It's his birthday, Melody said, taking the letter from my hands to read it. I glanced at the courier, waiting for our answer. Great. Just what I needed to spoil what started as a nice day. I looked closer at the delivery man. I was having a good morning, looking forward to brunch with my wives and our daughter, and now this guy wants to chat urgently. I'm sorry, sir. I know this isn't the best time, but I need a response, the man said, blushing a little. I looked at Melody and she nodded. Let's go with the first time, 10:30, so we can move on to lunch afterward. What do I need to do? The courier began to check his folder. Do you have a computer with internet access and a webcam? He asked. He does. Just let me handle that, Melody said. He'll take care of it. He provided us with the details and a number to call if we had any issues, then left. I told Harmony and Mackenzie about the delay and why. They were both surprised, but also curious. Why did he want to talk? Melody set up the laptop with Microsoft Teams for me and connected it to the TV so the three girls could see the call without being on screen. At the scheduled time, we logged on and waited. Then, two people appeared on the screen. The first person on the call was Stephen Morrison. The second was an officer from the Department of Corrections. The officer spoke up first. Mr. Other, thank you for agreeing to speak with Mr. Morrison today. I'm here to set some rules. While this call is private, much like an in-person visit, the department reserves the right to monitor if any sensitive or prohibited topics are discussed. Do you agree to this condition, Mr. Other? I do, I replied. Then he'll leave you to it. This call is limited to 30 minutes. If more time is needed, you'll have to schedule another call. With that, he left the room. I turned my gaze to Morrison. So, I began. You know I can't stand you, right? Morrison wheezed, his voice as irritating as ever. It had a smugness that always grated on me. He looked heavier, too. Before prison, he was on the pudgy side, but now he seemed to have gained a lot more weight. I laughed. Feelings mutual, Morrison. You are the reason for just about every bad thing that's ever happened in my life. Before he could say anything, I started listing. First, you messed around with my wife for over a year. Second, you convinced her to leave me, making her think you were somehow the better choice. I continued counting on my fingers. Third, you pushed my daughter to cut me off. He smirked, but I kept going. Fourth, you publicly threatened me when my mother had just been diagnosed with cancer. His smile faded. And last, you even tried to hurt me, leaving a mark on my life like no one else. I honestly can't understand why I'm, even here, listening to you now. So, I finished. I'll give him this, he didn't take the bait right away. He paused, thinking over his next words. You know, he began slowly, when Carol and I first got involved, we tried to keep it quiet. She still had feelings for you, but I knew I could offer her something she didn't have a life away from someone who fixed pipes for a living. He glanced at me, waiting for a reaction, but I just stayed silent. I had wealth, a prestigious job as a surgeon, and a nice house. She wanted a new life, and I gave her that. He leaned back, a smug look on his face. Did you ever get close to her? He wore a smirk. I shrugged. No, I never really wanted that. I thought it was too complicated. He lost his cool for a moment, and I could hear muffled laughter from the other room where the girls were watching. He quickly brushed it off. Once I had her attention, she was mine. It didn't take much for her to leave you. My big win was getting her to let me take care of Mackenzie. That means you don't have a say anymore. He smiled. Even now in here, Mackenzie is my responsibility. I've treated her to trips, Nice gifts, and things you couldn't provide. While your ex-wife misses me and waits for my release so we can be a family again, your daughter is living well. I raised an eyebrow but kept my face calm. He seemed unaware of the changes in our lives. I knew all about his divorce from Carol and that I was helping Mackenzie through her illness, and she was in the other room, listening to everything. Oh, yes, Carol still likes me a lot. Mackenzie comes to me for advice about money in college. Your move to help her with school was appreciated. They were both glad to be away from you. Mackenzie celebrated with friends that night, but later came to me for support when I ended up here. He gestured around him, trying to act as if he was here by choice. I sighed, tired of his bragging. I could hear someone cursing in the other room. I knew it was Mackenzie, who couldn't stand this guy. So what do you want? I asked. I want to help you connect, he said simply. Connect? I replied. He sighed and spread his arms, trying to get my attention. I remembered this act from our earlier meeting and it felt pointless now, just like it did before. Yes, connect, Terry. He used my name, hitting a nerve. Since you're not involved with your family anymore, there are things you wouldn't know. He paused, letting his words settle. I'm offering to help you reach out to your ex-wife and daughter in exchange for your help if you follow along. I scoffed. Why would I want to talk to my ex-wife or daughter at all? They put the blame on me for, as you say, fancy trips, nice things, and a sense of being better than others. So don't be surprised if I don't see anything impressive in the person in front of me. But I still want to know, why would I want to see them? He leaned in, like he was about to share a secret. Because no matter what you think about Carol, me, or especially Mackenzie, she is still your blood. When I tell you this, you will want to see her more than anything else. But I have a favor to ask first. At this point, it was clear what he was aiming for. He wanted something from me to share that Mackenzie was unwell. I decided to act a little clueless. I still don't see why I would want to talk to them, let alone help someone I have every reason to feel angry with if we were in the same place. How's your jaw? By the way? I smirked back at him. He chuckled and shook his head. Terry, my foolish and unwise friend, my jaw's fine, but when I tell you my news, you will forget all about it and will be begging for my assistance. Come on, enough with the drama. You're a loser and from what I hear, pretty sad in life. So let's get on with it, I said, frustrated. He laughed, thinking he had the upper hand. We're nearly there, but first I need something from you. All right. Tell me what you want to say. He chuckled. First, I want you to agree to pay me $100,000. It doesn't have to be all at once. I have a few years to get it, but I need something for my troubles. Understand? I wanted to laugh, but held it back. Sounds like you have more than one request? I do. I want you to have your sister talk to the DA and ask them to lighten my sentence. So, you want money and a favor to lessen your sentence for some big news about my daughter that you think will make me look up to you? Let's just say both requests could be questionable. It is important news, he said, his grin broad, thinking he had me cornered. Well, I could easily just call Carol or Mackenzie myself. Did you think of that? His grin faded just a bit, but he kept it up and lied again. You can't. They have new numbers, and they are in a place you can't find them. You're just a plumber with no connections. If he only knew. He doesn't seem to remember my new job, or maybe he never checked. So I can't find or reach them, and the only way to get to them is through you. Is that what you're saying? Yep. Then why would I do that? He paused and let his smile disappear. Because Mackenzie is very ill. She can hardly move. Really? He took on a serious expression. Yes, really. Even though we've had our differences, if you help me, I can connect you with Carol and Mackenzie so you can say your goodbyes to the girl you once called a daughter. Today is your birthday, and I wanted to give you this chance. You help me, and I'll help you connect with Mackenzie because I know you still care about her. I'm not a complete monster. He tried to sound wise. I started to laugh. I let it start from my toes and build up. My chest filled with big breaths as I laughed. Tears began to flow down my face, and I slapped the table a few times. He just sat there smiling. But when I started to calm down, he became serious again. Terry, this isn't a joke. Mackenzie is in serious condition, and you need me to reach her and say goodbye. If you don't, you will live with that regret forever. I wouldn't want to stop my daughter from seeing her father one last time. I tried to stop laughing and signaled to the girls. Oh, sorry. I think you misunderstand my laughter. Honestly, it couldn't be further from the truth. This has been one of the most amusing conversations I've had in a while. You're right about today being my birthday, and your offer has really given me some amusement. But I need to be clear about a few things before I give you a real answer to your request. Okay? Okay, if you can be serious, I can handle it, he replied. At that moment, all three girls walked into the room, all dressed up and ready to celebrate. Melody wore a light blue summer dress with her hair pulled back and her makeup done. Harmony also wore a yellow version of a summer dress, her hair styled similarly. Mackenzie wore jeans and a summer blouse, her hat with a wig on, looking a bit upset. I held out my left arm, and Harmony came into view, sitting down on a chair she brought. She took my hand and leaned in for a quick kiss. Then we turned back to the camera together. Stephen, I want to introduce you to my wife, Harmony. She was with me at the hospital the day you caused me harm. I don't know if you remember her. Harmony and I now have twins. He nodded. And? I smiled and held out my right hand. Melody came onto my right side, sitting down in her own chair, and leaned in for a kiss just like Harmony. The three of us looked back at the camera, smiling, while Stephen sat there frowning. Mackenzie, watching off-screen, smirked, catching on to the light-hearted act I was playing. This is my other wife and Harmony's twin sister, Melody. We have 2 children together as well, I explained, keeping my tone casual. So, yes, I have 4 wonderful kids with these amazing women. Stephen's eyes widened, and I nodded. Now, before we talk about your proposal, let me tell you something about my life now, I began, glancing at my wives with a warm smile. I love these 2 incredible women with all my heart. Every day with them is a blessing, and we have a joyful, full life together. For my birthday this morning, they woke me up with a special celebration that made the day unforgettable. I could see Stephen's face tightening as he listened. So when you talk about your connection with my ex-wife, remember that she's not even a thought in my mind compared to these 2 amazing partners I have now, I said. There's simply no comparison. Stephen's eyes kept shifting between Melody and Harmony, who were smiling back, clearly supportive and full of affection. I think I know why you hold on to so much anger, Stephen, I continued. Perhaps you can't get over the past, but I'm here to tell you I've moved on. My life is full of love and happiness, and that's something I wouldn't trade for anything. Stephen's face turned red, and he leaned forward, muttering, But, you're just a plumber. None of this can be real. You're lying. Harmony chuckled, giving him a calm, knowing smile. Sorry, Stephen, she said, but Terry is our partner in our love, and that's the real story. She smiled and glanced at me, then back at the screen. Stephen, as you can see, I have no interest in reconnecting with Carol. This brings me to the next part of your request. I'm proud to be a plumber. Sure, I've had some messy jobs, especially during my early days, but it's honest work, and I'm not ashamed of it. I paused, letting a small smile form. But for a while now, I haven't been just a plumber. I let that sink in for a moment. Since I left Maitland, I've been the National Quality Manager for Delotes, Inc. My wives here are actually the daughters of the owners of the company, William and Martha Delotes. You might remember them from the night we first met? I raised an eyebrow, watching the realization dawn on his face. Yes, Stephen, they are my wife's parents. You think I'm struggling? On the contrary, I am part of a family with more resources than you can imagine. I paused again, allowing the reality to hit him. He took the bait. So what? He sneered. You're some big shot now, but without me, you won't be able to find Mackenzie and talk to her before it's too late. And now that I know you have money, I want $500,000 before I let you see your precious daughter. I looked thoughtful. Stephen, I said calmly, using his name to signal I was considering his words. The way you're talking makes it sound like you never really cared for Mackenzie. He laughed bitterly, shrugging. Not really, no, he admitted. She was just part of the deal with Carol. Carol thought if I adopted her and set a restraining order against you, it would keep Mackenzie under control and keep you out of our lives. She thought it would drive you crazy. I couldn't have cared less about some moody teenager who cried most nights, missing her dad. Off camera, Mackenzie listened, and I could sense how her feelings were shifting as she heard the truth. Stephen continued. Sure, she was annoying most of the time, but occasionally she served a purpose. Like that day outside the cafe when she confronted you, or when she took you to court over that voicemail you left on her birthday that was useful to us. Carol was just waiting for her to grow up and leave so we could live our lives, travel, and do whatever we wanted. He focused back on the camera, his gaze cold. Mackenzie was just a tool for Carol and me. She's not my real blood, and I couldn't care less what happens to her. But I know you do, and that's exactly why I'm here. You're going to give me what I want, or by the time you figure out where she is, it will be too late for her. So, that's how it is, I replied, glancing at Mackenzie. Exactly, he said with a smug smile and crossed his arms. As much as I've enjoyed our little back and forth, I said, raising my arms. Melody and Harmony stepped back and Mackenzie slid onto my lap. I don't think you'll get anything from me, but thanks for giving me an interesting story for my birthday. We'll all remember how you tried to blackmail me. He was silent, so I continued. Here's the truth, unlike your lies. I know you and Carol are divorced. The only affection you get now is from your buddy in the showers, and that's not changing anytime soon. I also know what you did to my dear daughter. I kissed her cheek. I now have 5 wonderful kids. And by the way, Mackenzie's cancer treatment is going really well. She's not in complete recovery yet, but we're hopeful with her treatment. I glanced at Mackenzie. Listen, sweetie, I know he is your father. Is there anything you want to say? Mackenzie looked at me, kissed my cheek, and giggled. Thanks, Daddy, she said. Then she turned to the screen. Pay attention. You and your partner used me when I was a confused teenager to hurt my family. I understand why, but that doesn't make it right. You're rude and have less class than a drunken fool out at night. And I heard everything you said. I've spent the last few months apologizing to my real father for my actions. So don't call, don't write, don't try to reach out again. I hope my dad forgives me one day. But I never want to see you again because if I do, you'll regret it. Now go back to where you belong. With that, she stood up and walked out of view, breathing a bit heavy. Melody, Harmony, and I exchanged glances. Then we turned back to the screen and simultaneously gave him a thumbs down, smiling as we hung up. Happy birthday to me. A few days later, it was Mackenzie's birthday, falling on a weekend. We planned a family BBQ in the afternoon. Dad, Paul, Kim, and the kids were there. I also invited Carol and reminded her to behave. She knew things were changing after everything we had learned. When I told Mackenzie her mother was coming to visit, Mackenzie almost called her to say not to come. I promised her that if her mother caused any problems, she would have to leave. I wasn't completely unhappy that the relationship between the mother and daughter was becoming strained. Over the past few months, we learned that Carol was more tricky and manipulative than we had realized. The surprise guest, who neither Mackenzie nor I expected, was Mackenzie's old boyfriend, Ben. Ben met Mackenzie about a year ago at university, and they had been together almost from the start. When Mackenzie got sick and had to stop her advanced studies, she broke up with him, thinking it was best for him to move on from someone facing such challenges. I hadn't heard much about him because Mackenzie cared deeply and felt heartbroken for ending things. So, she was shocked when he showed up. He had been trying to reach Carol for a long time, and she had gotten frustrated and told him that Mackenzie was now living with her father, who ran a large company in Bathurst. It wasn't entirely accurate, but it was a flattering story for my ex-wife. Ben did some digging and found Melody. My wife started to realize that she was almost as much a victim of her mother as I was. Once Melody heard Ben's story, she invited him to stay for the weekend. When he arrived, Mackenzie was so surprised that she dropped her glass on the lawn. They ran to each other, embracing and in tears. From then on, she hardly let go of his hand except to hug others or show Ben something new. Mackenzie looked truly happy while Carol didn't share that joy. Two important things happened that day. The first was when Mackenzie opened presents. My wives had taken her shopping and helped her pick out an entirely new wardrobe while we prepared the BBQ. Her old clothes were replaced with new styles that didn't rely on brand names to look good. William and Martha gifted her a new iPad with a keyboard, promising to help her get back into her studies. Dad gave her a new laptop for the same purpose. Kim welcomed her back to the family with a big hug and gave her 3 special bottles of rum as gifts. Later, I noticed Kim seemed emotional, but she said it was just allergies acting up. Still, she was happy that Mackenzie was home. I had 3 gifts for her, too. As we gathered to open them, the excitement grew. The first was a beautiful journal and a nice pen. I told her it was for her to write about her journey ahead. I wanted her to write down her thoughts and feelings, the ups and downs, so she could look back and celebrate her journey after getting through her illness in the years ahead. Everyone cooed at the gift. The second gift was similar to the old present Mackenzie had given me a few days before. The wrapping was a little worn. The card was slightly faded, but as she held it, we both began to cry. We both knew how special this gift was. She opened the card. It had a picture of cartoon teenagers at a party. Inside, it said, "Party on, happy birthday." But like the card I gave her, I had written a note. "My dearest Mackenzie, I miss you so much. And I don't know if you will ever see this. But please, please come back to me. I love you so much, Pumpkin. Love, Dad." I was feeling pretty down when I wrote that card. I didn't know the right words, but it said enough. Mackenzie dropped the card and hugged me. She told me she loved me and whispered how sorry she was. A few minutes later, she opened the old present. Inside was a new set of pajamas, an oversized t-shirt, and a very fancy scientific calculator. She had wanted it for months for school. At over $300, it took a while to save for it. She loved it. And even though the calculator seemed outdated with smartphones around, it found a special spot on her desk from then on. The last gift I gave her was a simple manila envelope. Inside was a paper saying that Mackenzie's adoption by Stephen Morrison was canceled. If she signed it and had a witness, she would once again be Mackenzie Other, daughter of Terry Other and Carol Brown. I must have held my daughter, who was finally back with me, for almost 10 minutes. This time, the tears were of joy, not sadness. When she felt ready to sign and ask for witnesses, almost everyone stepped up. The only one who didn't was Carol. It took over 8 years, but I finally had my daughter back. I also had a memorable conversation with Carol. Things were starting to wind down and people were heading inside. Mackenzie was showing Ben the house, probably her room too. The father in me wanted to step in, but she wasn't a teenager anymore. She was in her 20s and grown up. By her age, I had already had a daughter, so I couldn't mind her wanting time with him. My girls had taken the kids inside with Kim for baths and started them with a movie. Paul and Dad cleaned the barbecue while I tidied up the trash before heading inside. I had just finished putting the last bags into the bins when I turned around and saw Carol. "I hope you're happy, Terry," she said, standing there with her hands on her hips, staring at me. It had been a while since I had seen her, and I noticed she still didn't look much different. She seemed a bit out of shape, like a potato with arms and legs. Maybe a Ms. Potato Head? I am, Carol," I replied. "These days, there are a lot of things making me happy. Today, for example, has been great with nice weather and celebrating our daughter's birthday. Is there something specific you want me to be happy about?" She raised her hands in frustration and turned to walk away. I hurried after her and caught up on the back deck. "Carol, you can't just say that and leave." "Of course I can, Terry," she shot back. "You never understood anything all these years." I looked at her. "Understand what, Carol? I don't know what you mean. Just tell me straight." "Yes, I'm happy," I said, feeling annoyed. I really didn't want this conversation, but it was about Mackenzie. She stared at me, clearly upset. Then she seemed to let out a sigh and almost sank into one of the patio chairs. "Terry, you were my support since high school. For 15 years, I took you for granted. You never made a big deal about the little things and did all you could for me." She looked up as I sat down across from her. "When we had our child at 18, right after high school, my world shrank to just Mackenzie and you. I became unhappy, thinking there might be something better out there." I nodded, still not quite sure where this was headed. "I always pushed you and took what I could because I felt above you. I mean, being married to a plumber." She gave a little laugh. "My friends were with people in respectable jobs like consultants and lawyers." Then she seemed lost in thought for a moment. No one said anything, but I knew they thought it. I could hear it in their voices, judging me. "There goes Carol, married to a plumber." She looked at me again. "I waited for 15 years, taking everything I could from you without crossing any lines." I nodded. I was aware of that. When Stephen came into my life, he dazzled me with his wealth and confidence. When I shared my unhappiness, it was easy for him to charm me. But he wasn't great in other ways, even though his money made me feel more important. My friends saw me as someone, not just attached to a plumber. She sat quietly for a moment, thinking, and then suddenly looked straight at me, her eyes filled with intensity. "But you had to ruin everything. You couldn't just give me what I wanted. If you hadn't gone to the hospital that night and given Mackenzie's money to me as I'd asked, I'd still have Stephen's wealth, his social standing, and everything that came with it." I sat back, shocked. I had hoped Carol was here to apologize, but clearly she wasn't. She stood up, starting to pace. Stephen and I were happy. Terry, we were happy. In a few years, you would have been a distant memory, and Mackenzie would have come around, learning to love Stephen. We could have been a happy family. But you just couldn't leave us alone. Carol, no, Terry. You listened to me for once. Her words came out in anger. You ruined my life. You always did what you thought was right, not what I wanted, and now you're here with those two women. I stood up, anger sparking in my own voice. Carol, don't speak like that. Be quiet, Terry, she yelled, louder than I'd ever heard her. Her tone shifted to bitter pleading. Every time, you come out on top, and I lose. You keep taking everything from me. It's all your fault. You took my daughter, you took the money, you took my status. Everything's about you. Why can't you just go away? She went on, her voice bitter. Now I'm stuck in a dead-end job with no way to move up. You'll always be the wife of the surgeon who snapped and tried to hurt you because of my choices. You've got this big house, money, respect in the community, and a happy family. And I'm left with nothing. Are you finished, Carol? I asked, crossing my arms and looking at her. Not even close. You've ruined everything, and you always have to be the hero. Well, now it's my turn. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My family had kindly invited her into our home, and she was ranting about my life, my family, and my happiness I'd built with Harmony and Melody after she'd left me. I took a breath, ready to respond, but we were interrupted. Hey, enough, Melody called out. Neither of us had noticed Melody and Harmony stepping up behind me, standing close in support. A few steps back, Mackenzie stood in the doorway, her face a mixture of shock and anger. Harmony and Melody stepped forward. Harmony reached out and gave Carol a sharp slap on one cheek, and before she could react, Melody followed with a slap to the other. How dare you? Melody said firmly. After everything you've done to Terry and Mackenzie, he convinced us to let you into our home for Mackenzie's birthday. No one, and I mean no one, wanted you here. But we did it because Mackenzie is living here while our husband is helping her get well. It's her birthday, so we should be nice. Harmony took a deep breath. But here you are acting like you're better than everyone, yelling at our husband and calling us terrible names. Carol sat on the couch, stunned, looking at each of us. I crossed my arms and watched my friends with a small smile. Well, you're right about one thing, Melody said with a grin. We are devoted to Terry. Did you know he can really impress me with just his skills? Carol looked shocked. Harmony jumped in. Now you've really upset us by yelling at him. Your self-righteous act isn't fooling anyone. Your friends never cared that our man is a plumber. They made you feel uncomfortable because you're looking for someone rich. You just pretend to be something you're not. Melody nodded and added, That's why you don't have anything. You can't see that you're the problem, not Terry. All the blame you put on him is unfair. You can't name a single time he sought out trouble. Every argument, every injury he's faced came from your actions. Mackenzie, who had just come in, stood next to me. They're right, Mom. Ever since we pushed Dad away, he has never tried to come back. We're the ones who reached out to him. I regret what I did in the past, and I'm so grateful that he has let me reconnect with him today. She smiled at me, and I smiled back. Dad has changed my life, Mom. He gave up so much to help me fight my illness. When we pushed him away, he actually saved 2 wonderful women from a dangerous situation, putting himself at risk just because of who he is. My dad is the kindest and most caring man. He loves us all so much. But Mackenzie, Carol moaned, he took everything from me? Oh, come on, Mom, Mackenzie said firmly. Every problem we've had is because of your choices. Dad never wanted revenge. It was you who couldn't move on. Dad told us to give him space, but we didn't listen. He didn't need to do anything to us. We were the ones who created our problems. I'm just glad I figured it out before it was too late. And while we're talking, let's remember how you treated me. You always took his side, betraying me and telling me to do whatever he wanted to keep him happy. I was your daughter. Did you ever stand up for me? Carol looked at the four of us, realizing what we were saying. My daughters were giving Carol hard looks, waiting for another chance to confront her. Mackenzie seemed really disappointed in her mother, and I felt upset too, but didn't want to get in the way of what had turned into a showdown between four women. Mackenzie sighed. Look, Mom. The family was really kind to invite you here for my birthday. It was nice to see you, but I think you've overstayed your welcome. Are you asking me to leave? Carol replied, surprised. Mackenzie hesitated. I finally found my voice. No, Carol, Mackenzie isn't. All four girls turned to me. I waved them off and focused on Carol. I am, I said firmly. You have overstayed your welcome many times today, and I want to make it clear that you are not welcome here again. If our daughter wants to see you, she can meet you somewhere else. But, Carol. She looked at me, waiting. To answer your question, I said with a smile, I'm feeling very happy. Let's go. I helped her up and guided her inside to get her coat and handbag, then walked her to her car. I didn't let go of her arm until she opened the door. I leaned in and gave her a final kiss on the cheek. Carol, it's time for you to move on and live your life without us. Goodbye. But Terry, you can't do this. Oh, but I can, Carol. This is my family home, and you're no longer welcome here. If you have a problem, you can speak to my lawyer. She's inside, glaring at you from the window. She's also my older sister, and she loves me very much. If I asked, she wouldn't hesitate to take action. So it's best for you to leave. I turned and walked back to the front porch where everyone joined me, watching as Carol left. My wives stood beside me as they always did, providing support. In front of me were my 4 young children. My daughter, now back with us, held Harmony's hand. I could see she was sad about her relationship with her mother ending, but she knew she was loved and supported. Mackenzie held Ben's hand. Although he didn't say much, his care and loyalty to her were clear. Off to the side were Paul and Kim, along with their 3 kids. Behind them were William, Martha, and my dad, John. I had been through a lot over the past 8 years, and if it weren't for all these wonderful people standing with me today, I might not have made it. After a moment of watching Carol in her car, everyone started heading back inside. Dad? Young Adam asked. Is that mean lady leaving now? I ruffled his hair. Yes, Adam, she's gone, and I don't think she's coming back. Good, he exclaimed, running inside to join his brother and sisters. Then I heard my dad calling, Ice cream! For dessert. Dad? Mackenzie asked as we stood outside. Yes, Pumpkin? I replied. Ben's going to stay the night, okay? Sure, we can set up one of the spare rooms, but we don't have many left since everyone is here. She shook her head. No, Dad, he will stay in my room, okay? It was more of a statement than a question. I guess this is how William and Martha felt when their daughters chose me. I was at a loss for words. My daughter was having her boyfriend stay in her room for the night, on her birthday. Melody and Harmony giggled, and Melody added, That's fine, sweetie. Happy birthday. I echoed the same sentiment. Even though she was now 23 and an adult, she would always be my little girl. My wives hugged me and kissed me, pulling me away from my thoughts. It's okay, baby, Melody whispered while kissing my neck. This is what she needs. She's a smart girl. and you won't be a grandfather too soon." Harmony laughed at her sister's words as I embraced my girls. My gaze returned to Carol sitting in her car. I felt love from these two incredible women who had supported me and brought so much more to my life. But then, I noticed Carol in her car, trying to convince herself to leave. For a moment, our eyes met, and I felt sorry for her. She would never know the kind of love we shared, the warmth that comes from being there for the people you care about. Carol would never understand that if you have loved ones, you can overcome just about anything. Finally, my ex-wife started her car, and we watched as she drove away, hopefully out of our lives. If only she understood that love was about giving, not receiving, we might have all been in a better place. Sadly, I doubted Carol would ever grasp that idea and would continue to blame others for her losses. As she drove out, laughter filled our home. I could hear everyone enjoying themselves, but I felt happiest hearing Mackenzie laugh. Soon, Melody and Harmony pulled me inside, where we gathered around a big birthday cake and sang happy birthday to my daughter. Life was good. 5 years later, the letter had arrived in the mail almost a week ago, but she hadn't opened it. Bills were straightforward. She either paid them or pushed them aside until she had the money. That evening, as she returned to her small apartment close to work, she tossed her bag on the couch and walked into her little kitchen. She warmed up some leftovers and poured herself a small glass of inexpensive red wine as she stretched. The limp she had from the accident 4 years ago was painful, and some days she could barely walk without help. Her being very overweight from overeating and feeling sad didn't help her situation. She sat back down on the couch, turned on the news, ate her simple dinner, and drank her wine. They didn't go well together, but it was what she could afford. When she placed her bowl on the side table, her hand touched the letter and she jumped back as if it might hurt her. For several minutes, she just stared at the letter, then let out a deep breath. Finally, she pushed her hair back, picked up the letter with her fingers, and opened it. Although it wasn't the neatest writing, it was handwritten. His words were always easy to understand. She even smiled at the spelling and grammar mistakes. He was a plumber, not a writer. She took a sip of her wine and began to read. Carol, I hope this letter finds you in a better place than when we last met. I hope that your injuries have healed and you have found some peace after what happened. I can't say I was happy with your response, but I don't blame you for what your former husband did. Who knew he would be at the hospital that day? But now he is gone, and you have to face the results of your choices. All I wanted was for both of us to support Mackenzie through her last treatment. I thought inviting you would be a kind gesture. I may not have liked you for a long time, but you were there at the start of our daughter's battle against cancer, so I wanted you to be there at the finish. Unfortunately, things became too complicated. It took almost a year for Harmony to walk again after you and your husband hurt her. Today, she is almost fully recovered, though her leg still hurts when the weather changes. Honestly, you are lucky he passed away that day. Otherwise, I think his words could have put you in a lot of trouble. Next, what were you thinking? Everyone knows I would never have done what you told Harmony I did, and she believed me. By the way, Melody's hand has healed from the injury she received that day when he tried to harm us. Just so you know, none of us forgive you for your role in what happened. I should tell you that my love for my wives has grown even stronger. We care for each other more each day, especially after that day when they showed their support, helping Mackenzie and me. Their love keeps me strong when I think about you and all the hurt you caused. Once again, you couldn't leave well enough alone and had to push the wrong buttons. If you hadn't, he might still be alive, and the past 4 years wouldn't have been so hard for all of us. Believe it or not, Mackenzie asked me to write this letter to you. She asked me to be honest, so here it is. About Mackenzie, our daughter, I am so proud of her. She fought through cancer and earned her degree. She married Ben, and they just welcomed their first child. Can you believe we're grandparents? After all this time, this is the real reason I'm writing. Mackenzie and I talk about you often, but she hasn't reached out again because she feels hurt and ashamed, Carol. After that man passed away, she felt embarrassed to be your daughter. I tried telling you many times that you needed to care for more than just yourself. You needed to show kindness and understand what true love is, but you never did. Because of this, you lost the chance to have a relationship with your daughter, her husband, and our grandchild. I've included a couple of pictures of Mackenzie, Ben, and little Jordan. He's a lively child with big brown eyes and strong hands. Mackenzie thinks he might be a plumber like her grandfather someday. I'm not sure, but I will support him if that's what he wants. I don't expect birthday or baby shower invites. There isn't much goodwill for you in the family. Part of that is my fault, because I can't say anything nice about you. I wish I could feel different, but I will always carry anger for the pain you caused my family. And before you try to blame me for my words, remember this is on you. You started this when you cheated on me, Carol. It's your actions that led to this situation, so it's your responsibility to fix it. None of us who once cared about you feel any obligation to help you now. I'm not sure if I'll write again. Maybe in a few years, if I feel differently. But none of us want any contact with you. So please do us a favor, and don't write back. Carol read the letter 3 times, then carefully folded it and put it back in the envelope. In her small bedroom, she had a box of cherished items. She placed the letter inside the box with old photos. There were pictures of her and Terry on vacation, smiling and enjoying Bali. There were pictures of her pregnant with Mackenzie, glowing with excitement. There were even some of Terry in his work clothes, hard at work to provide for them. Looking at those images made her feel a deep sadness. She had lost so much, nearly everything, because she never realized that what she and Terry had back then was love. She gazed at the photo of a young Terry, strong and smiling, happy to be sharing a moment with her. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the picture. But even as she cried quietly, no one was there to hear or care. Hey everyone! Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss any of the exciting stories we have coming up. What do you think about the characters in this story? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.